no Rambam today, RJ. Unfortunately, Ben had to cancel, but we'll get back to it next week. But we are going to use this time today. I'm going to do a review with my main man, my boy, Yacobi Mugatu, Jacob Yaakov. Got you. Baruch Hashem. Shevach Leil. I'm seeing for a second how I'm trying to share a screen to show the file that I have on.
So click on present.
Got it. Share. Katumpa. Pow. And add the stage. Haha. Success. Okay. First, before we start, my wife walked down over here. And with tearing eyes, demanded, and rightfully so, that I start the stream by mentioning that our whole country, unfortunately, and the people and humanity really should be devastated by the unfortunate news that the Bibas family, Shiri and her daughter, her kids, Kfir and Ariel,
sons,
unfortunately,
4 years old and I believe 5 months.
Yeah. No, 5 months doesn't make any sense. Does 5 months make sense?
Kfir was 5 months when he was taken.
Yeah. Okay. So, horrible news. It's in the context, obviously, of a general year of horrible news, and we obviously hope, and the Torah we're learning now, hopefully, will elevate their souls to be with the Master of the Universe, their Father, of course.
How about you say what we traditionally say in such cases?
Baruch Dan Emet.
Hashem Yinkon Damav.
Oh, there's many things we say. Yes, their blood should be avenged. I mean, it's a loaded term. We don't have to get into.
It's not a loaded term. You're such a guy.
Why? Why am I a guy?
What we say when someone is murdered is Hashem Yinkon Damav.
Yeah, I that is what we said. I just said that is a loaded word. That's it. I didn't say we don't say it.
It's not loaded.
It's loaded in the context of using that. Okay, take a step back. Hey, Jacob. I hope you had a good day.
I got tea just because you mentioned you're getting tea.
Okay, the point was that all of us everywhere should take a moment to just think and hope and pray that clearly there should be no unnecessary death, and redemption should come very soon, and
all the evildoers should be destroyed off the face of the earth.
Yes,
what's
amen.
The Shir Hashal Yom, Hayom, Mr. Levy?
We are now going to transition. We are now going to transition to the future of world religions. Okay, so.
You're such a.
The red cap is coming
you're
up.
Such
actually,
a Levy. You're such a Levy. When Moshe came down the mountain, you know who were the Leviim? When Moshe came down the mountain, you know what the Leviim did?
I'm wearing my Levi ring. The whole thing's here.
Are you wearing your Levi sword?
That's true. Okay, so because unfortunately a lot of the strife that we're even in is because of
red calf. I thought you meant golden calf. Sorry.
I mean, I was talking about the red heifer, which again I was mentioning how a friend of mine went to Texas, brought them to Shiloh right now, developing all the halacha around that. It's amazing, beautiful. Redemption times. So, as part of us moving into redemption times, there is a rabbi named Rav Melamed, and he has a series of halachic book called Peninei Halacha, which is very, very famous. And this is a very interesting rabbi because he seems to have a more, let's say, we'll call it I don't want to say a modern approach, but he seems to be not static and moving in a certain sense with the times, or at the very least being present and hearing the cry of a nation and doing his best to what's the word you use, Jacob, for a posek din?
Deciser.
A deciser, right? And his books became very, very, very popular. And one of the recent ones was a little more controversial, but he's coming up with a new one. Now, I got these notes. The reason I'm doing this because I got this on Rosh Hashanah on the New Year a while back in September. But these were the notes. But now the book is coming out very soon, so I figured we could read them. It talks all about religion. It has a chapter just on Christianity, just on Islam, just on the Eastern religions. But this is one talking about the future of the religions, which I wanted to review together with Jacob. We're going to go through it quickly, and obviously we could stop and talk and digress, and we could, no, we're not worried about this.
Sing the Shir Shel Yom.
Okay, right? The divine spark that.
So this is by Rabbi Melamed?
This is Rabbi Melamed, who is a student, of course, of Rav Kook. So you're going to have to, take that in. That's in the context of Rav Kook. That's what I was about to say as I see you looking at the word Rav Kook. I see your eyes.
I didn't see Rav Kook. Where's Rav Kook?
Okay. Right? The divine spark that are in the idolatrous religions. Rav Kook talks about, when we're coming to discuss other religions, that we have to ultimately realize that the whole world is happening through divine, and hashgacha prati. There's divine providence in the whole world. And so we need to know that while there's idol worship in the world, clearly there's still a purpose for it. While people are still are living in this in a certain sense, very material world and very physical world, it's still difficult for them to think about the complete abstract unified concept of God, and they need some sort of physical thing they could attach to, generally speaking, of course. Now, in every religion there's a divine spark of morality that sustains it, and from it sustains it discerns between its rules of good and evil. And that way humanity could, by the way, I'm just my pausing is because I'm translating this on the go. Humanity could progress gradually towards eventually recognizing the unification of God and his moral teachings. Meaning there could be an understanding of idolatry. Above all this idolatry, there is good and evil, these morals out there. And that's what we find in all the old stories of all the old gods, the myths. Even though the power of the god is great, he's limited. And they are, they're kfufim, they are, how do you translate kfufim?
Kfuf means bent.
Not bent, but they're confined to to fate ultimately, and we also see that their actions have an effect on their fate, and every god that goes passes a certain threshold or a certain point and sins and lust or too much lust or too much pride, right, or doesn't think about the other gods, he'll get punished. And we see this hierarchy that's inside these different gods. But inside there is hidden is the belief in one God, the sustaining thing of all good things. As we say in Malachi 1:11, right? So as Malachi says of here, that from all across the world, everyone sanctifies my name and offers incense. Now, this is happening during that time. And you could, of course, ask, what are you talking about, Malachi? Because the reality is there's people doing that stuff out there. However, what Malachi is referring to and what our sages have taught us is that at that time, even the idol worshippers were still referencing Elohei Elohim, right? The God, the main God, ultimately, the ultimate God that's behind all things.
The monarchical trinity.
The monarchical. Okay. There you go. You have some of our little corner lingo. משמעות הדבר שגם שבעת שהתפיסה האנושית הייתה מוגשמת, right? While all humanity was thinking things in these what's the word for מוגשמת? I'm looking for
materialized.
Is it materialized though?
Realized.
One second. Be here with me for a second.
Mekushemet. Yeah. Realized.
Is it realized?
Come into being.
Okay. So, well, it's here in the more, as you were saying, the context, I guess we'll just use realized. And there was not almost one person in the world that didn't believe in the gods that control all these different powers in the world, and worship them to receive help from them. But ultimately, in his heart, there was a belief in the main source of all things. But most people didn't find any meaning in that, right? So they went around praying to those different gods, and they were considered Ovdei Avodah Zara Beshituf. As we spoke about this many times, this is considered joint worship, so to speak. There's halachic ramifications that we've discussed many times in this channel, and perhaps we'll get them later on. Now, out of this group of people that were doing their thing, right, there were Yechidei Gula. There were a select few that actually took time to think and think deeply about the source of their belief. And their prayer was even more focused towards the God behind the curtain, so to speak. And with great sacrifice and through the wilderness and the darkness of all the other religions, they tried to do the best to promulgate these values through the hearts of people. And even the greatest of them were gifted Ruach HaKodesh. What would you call Ruach HaKodesh?
Holy Spirit, but really means prophecy.
Right. וכפי שאמר תנא דבי אליהו, מעיד אני עלי שמיים וארץ, שבין איש ובין אישה, בין עבד ובין שפחה, בין נוכרי ובין ישראל, הכל לפי מעשה רוח הקודש הורה עליו. Crazy statement, which is that we learn in the Tana Derbi Eliyahu that we learn that a man or a woman, a slave or a Gentile, an Israelite, all according to their measure and their ways, the divine spirit can rest on them, right? So this talks about how, while we generally talk about a specific relationship that we have with Hashem, nevertheless, everyone can potentially tap in. With this divine spirit, these select few deepen their belief in the source of life. And even though they did not cease with their idol worship, within their context of idol worship, they still created new laws and new ways, rules of conduct, which were helpful and in sustaining the world. And Alehem Amar Rabbi Meir, what does Rabbi Meir tell us? He tells us, "Afilu nochri v'osek b'Torah, harei hu kekohen gadol." Right, a Gentile, but that's studying the Torah, he is like the high priest. שנאמר, ושמרתם את חוקותיי ואת משפטיי אשר יעשה אותם העדי בחר בהם. כהנים, לוויים וישראלים, לא נאמר אלא האדם. Right, because we learned this from this line in Leviticus 18:5, which is, "You will keep my commandments and my rulings, and man will live by these." First of all, there's a general statement about how the Torah is to enrich us for a life well lived, right? This is not, we don't have a nihilistic mindset of here, but more specifically, it talks about man of here. It doesn't emphasize the Levite or the priest or the Israelite, rather all man. Right? Really, what we're talking about here, what this referencing is that this Torah that the Gentile could participate in, and by doing so honestly and participating so from a true place, they could reach the spiritual level of the high priest. What Torah is this that we're talking about? We're talking about the 7 Noahide laws that Jacob has blessed us with his beautiful, beautiful channel and hard work to allow us to create such a beautiful space. Right? Right? That in them we have the underpinnings of belief and morality. לא זו בלבד, אלא הוסיף הרב קוק, שייתכן שמנהיגי הדתות אף קיבלו עזרה משמיים לעשות מופתים. Rav Kook even adds that the leaders of the main world religions even potentially received help from God, right? Divine help to literally create miracles. כדי ששומעיהם יקבלו את הדעת שקידמה את מצבם המוסרי. I'll pause.
And Rabbi Burton, in my recent discussion with him, actually quoted Rav Kook saying exactly that.
Exactly. Yes, I'm so happy. That was beautiful. Correct. So that's a very big line, and why people that are listening to us, and we'll talk about like a little Jacob's ladder inside baseball. We spoke about crazy case once of Pinchas Lapid, who has gone even as far as to talk about that the resurrection himself, the resurrection of Jesus itself doesn't really negate the Torah. And we should realize that lines like this at the Rav Kook, and why people should understand why this is controversial, because in a quote unquote mainstream halachic book that is going to be in many people's houses, a line like this line, well, this is not the line. He's not quoting Rav Kook over here, but what he's referencing over here, this is a line that I saw around 20 years ago, which was, it wasn't there for everyone to look at. So to me,
I don't know about that. I mean, Rabbi Burton, I think, very correctly said, if you're reading the Rambam, it's pretty much there.
Vadai, of course, it's pretty much there. There's many things that are right there in front of us, right? However, when we're not dealing with them, we're not thinking about when we have an exile mentality, right? Or when we didn't have to be in that space about worrying about the Gentiles, because really we were running around like Tivya, right? There was no other hand. We had to survive. But now there are other options. Right? If there's from these 7 laws, it comes out, we understand from this that the Bnei Noach actually founded religions. That was their source. You can't just keep it 7 without defining what these things are, which also leads, of course, to much confusion, as we know today with our beautiful, beloved Noahites. Right? We have to make laws. Really, dinim ultimately opens up the door to building a whole infrastructure to a society, right? Because you have to have all these laws and rules and judges, and the judges need to get paid, and all these rules. Suddenly, you need potentially more of the Torah, right, to allow you to assist to do this. So because of this, they all have to have their own value hierarchy that all has some point of orientation, and that's what it's based on, right? The meaning crisis we're looking for, they had meaning. This was the point of their meaning ultimately, at the end of the day, at that time. By the way, over there, exactly, I was going to say, big line over there. He's just dropping this down now. To be fair, his Shamish sent me all his notes on those that are Machmir, like the Nadav Yehuda and others, and all those that are Mekel, right?
Okay.
So I know they did their homework. Rov, he and this
Rabbi Wiener says quite clearly that lehefech.
Again, that could be a separate stream. The point is, and this is why it's interesting, this is a rabbi that has wide shoulders, that has an effect, and he is making a serious claim over here in modern days. So it's quite interesting. Kol od meyazdei hadatot, right? He obviously qualifies this. Shitzfu be'emnutam gam et Hashem Elohei Elohim lo avru ba'isur. Okay, right? So while I could say that's what's happening in the Shinto religion, maybe that's a little more difficult. Obviously, in Christianity, there's a much clearer path to be able to shape that out.
I mean, look, ultimately we say minhag avatam b'yadam, and a person who just follows, we grade on a curve.
Definitely once you get towards the Trinity, which already the Meiri talks about.
No. We grade on a curve. A person who's born in India has a lesser chiyuv than somebody who's born in Mea Shearim.
Right. So correct. And he gets that. He references that. Where do we stop? Okay. Till as long as they made sure that in our case, in our context, the father is still part of the situation, you're all good in the hood. ואם יצטרכו לכך כדי לחזק את בני עמם בשמירת 7 המצוות, הרי שלפיו מצבם נהגו כראוי. And maybe in their context, at their time, this is what they needed. This is the story they needed. This is what they needed to deal with the people they're with at their mental capacity, social capacity, the little physical location they're in, right? Who they're dealing with. והחטאים הנוראים יראו כאשר הפסיקו לשתף אמונה בהשם ולא שמרו את כללי המוסר ובשם אמונתם האלילית תוסיפו להרשי ולכתוב. Right? So once they abandoned those morals, right, connected to the source, obviously craziness happened at that point, right? You could decide to then look at like as an example of Hitler and Nazis and leaving completely, going towards leaving all those values and what the atrocities that they brought from us. I'm trying to think if we should go into 1 second into this note. Okay, actually, it's quite interesting. He talks about these unique individuals, which let's say in this case he's sort of hinting at Muhammad and Jesus, right? נאמר בתנא דבי אליהו, כבר אפשר שימצאו יחידי סגולה שיעזרו עזר אלוהי בהנחת נימוסים ומנהגים מסוירים, שסוף כל סוף יביאו את המנהגים על פיהם לבוא להכרת האמת והאור האלוהי. As we mentioned earlier, God could assist these people, so slowly but surely everyone could understand the true light of God. And he mentions also, כי רובם מניחי הדתות היו אנשי דעה ויושר לב. Most of them were actually people of דעה would be what? This not discernment, would be
discerning's fine. Wisdom. Okay,
discernment, ויושר לב, right? They were true of heart. ורבים מהם, ואולי כולם זכו לרוח הקודש על פי מעשיהם, right? They maybe even, some of them or all of them, at their level, received their own divine providence, and potentially prophecy. אלא שמפני הירידות ההומוניות ירדו הציורים אצלם ירידה אחר ירידה, עד שנהפכו לרועץ ולהשפלה גדולה בהרבה דברי בחיי הרוח והמוסר והרבה עניינים מבזקים בחיי החברה. But as these things got watered down, or Jacob talks about the crayon analogy, right? Eventually, when you're looking at this thing that's fully, mishmashed on top, right? Then you start losing its. I'm
surprised he doesn't talk about people just being evil.
In the source of belief in God, there's we don't negate other religions. שאפשר שיהיו נשפעות גם כן שפע מדע ונבואה או רוח הקודש או שער עזר אלוהי על כמה אומות לפי מצבן והכן על ידי טובן וחסדיהן, right? That they could be having their own movie, right? So let them enjoy their own show, their own relationship with the master of the universe. ביחד לדתות המסתעפות מישראל, specifically those that branch out from Israel, more directly, right? Because he says first there's the early religions, but Islam and Christianity, דבר ייתכן להיות שהייתה בזה מצד המייסדים הערה האלוהית, להיות משתדלים בשכלול חלק רשום מהאנושות לפי הראוי להם. Could be that these specific prophets, right, whether it be Muhammad or Jesus, had their own path, which making sure that to enlighten humanity at their level where they are at their context, right? To the Arabs, and they had Muhammad, and in the Christians, let's say in a Greek or Roman setting, they had Jesus. בצד זה התכלית היה אפשר שיכוון איזה עניינים מופתים ומוחשיים אם היו צורכים לחוזקם, right? And they could even have done miracles, right? So by that, they already cover all bases. So far, Jacob, just a question. Is this interesting? Do you want to move on? Is this annoying? Is this good?
I mean, it's a very unagentic way of looking at things. Look, yes, there were people who were Yechidei Segula who were able to be Zoche even to Moftim and Ruach HaKodesh, and that's beautiful. At the same time, there were Rashayim, Murshayim, who were able to take the Shrinta to Galuta and make the world worse. Hakol, what was it? Kol Hagadol Min Chavero Yitzro gadol michavero. Right? We don't ascribe this caricature view of Gentiles, they're all going to hell, nor do we ascribe this caricature view of Gentiles that they're all, they're such nice people, right? We ascribe agency to people. We ascribe bechira to people.
But Jacob, one second. To be fair, right, because we're reading this a little out of context. In the beginning, when he speaks about Christianity and the chapter on Christianity and Islam, he starts with the whole, he writes much about the atrocities that happened, the evils. Now he's talking about his relationship to the religion itself, right? In its ideal form, where, what's the source of that religion? Now, there's a separate conversation, which is, what do you do with evil? That's we're putting that aside.
What's the source? I mean, the source of everything is, I would say, Deuteronomy 30, right? I have placed before you life and death, good and evil, and you shall choose life. And each person, including Gentiles, has their So Don asks, anything in there about the dual covenant theology? I'm a big fan of that. I would say it's more than a dual covenant theology. It's a matter of infinite covenants. Because we have an infinite God who has an individual relationship with every single human person. And each person has a capacity to move from where they are. Look, it's the analogy I often use is, it's not a question of where you're standing on the mountain. It's a question of where were you when you were born on the mountain, and which way you are facing on the mountain, and which way you are moving on the mountain, right? So, our good friend Yoav, right, who says, Hashem Yinkom Dama.
One second.
Talks about Jacob's ladder even more beautifully than I ever have. It's an infinite ladder. It's a ladder. You move up and you move down.
I think that infinite is the proper word, even though at the end of this, whether today or another time, we'll see how ultimately he's speaking from the Jewish perspective, right? So there's clearly a point of orientation. But okay, just I want to go through this note because these are things we discussed before, and I think again it's interesting to see it in a codified, so to speak, context setting. Ganas Kalim, he's also mentioning over here. This is still part of that footnote. Ganas Kalim is Gan. I don't know how to say it in Arabic, but this is by Rav Netanel Payumi, contemporary of Maimonides. He was a Dayan in Yemen at the time. He writes, "En min hanimna she'Hashem yitbarach v'yitale yishlach le'olamo et mi shirtzeh matai shirtzeh." That God could send to this world who He wants, when He wants. He sent prophets before the giving of the Torah, and He could even give them after the giving of the Torah. So the world won't be left without religion. We already said about the earlier verse in Malachi that all people worship God. And He also already says that everyone ultimately will worship Him. Right? So he says, like, we have our own unique relationship, but that's not there to deny that the Muslims, because he was speaking in a Muslim context, received a prophet, Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he's doing his thing. Now, we, of course, you could just say, does the person not exist? The concept, the idea right now, and the point is,
it's not about Muhammad. That's the thing. That's my whole thing. That it seems to me that this is very much talking in the abstract with generalizations, and I dare say even prejudice.
I would again say that we could gladly read through later his chapter on Islam and Christianity, but I feel like those concerns you have are addressed. Again, in this chapter.
How long is this book? What is this book?
What do you mean? He has a book. He has like 5 books on Shabbos. Each one's a thick book. This one's just about faith. There's many different things. He gets into these things as well. Okay. The Rambam, I don't know if you want to read this. He talked about the Rambam has like issues over here with regards to the damage that Islam and Christianity do over here. There's a Chidush Dar conversation over here as well, but let's move on. So what should now that we gave that little intro, what should our relationship be with these religions? כתב מרן הרב קוק, צרות העין הגורמת לראות בכל מה שחוץ לגבול האומה המיוחדת רק ככיעור וטומאה, right? Someone that's used to looking at everything outside my tribe, my group, or outside my nation, my special nation, my select nation, as disgusting or ugly or unholy, היא מהמחשכים הנוראים שגורמים הריסה כללית לכל בניין הטוב הרוחני. It actually ruins and darkens and causes devastation to the building of the spiritual. שכל נפש עדינה מצפה לראות, that every gentle soul wants to have. If you want to have a spiritual reality and you want to be connected to eternity, you can't be denying certain things. שכן, that are true. שכן אהבת הבריות צריכה להיות חיה בלב ובנשמה. אהבת כל האדם בייחוד ואהבת כל העמים כולם. Because inside, the love of all creation needs to be alive inside our hearts and souls, loving each man individually and loving all the people of the world together. וכל ביטוי השנאה כלפי גויים הם רק על הרשע והזוהמה שבעולם, that Jacob rightfully wants to rid the world from. That when we talk about any term or expression of hate towards the Gentile is only towards the evil and filth that's in the world that's done by that evil, but not by Gentiles themselves. And of course, there could be amazing and beautiful and holy Gentiles, as we spoke about earlier. And this would be true also about the evildoers in Judaism as well, right? Just to be clear. This love has to stand regardless of different opinions within the different world religions that Jacob beautifully showed us in the conversation this morning or yesterday morning with that beautiful Muslim brother. ולמרות כל החילוקים של הגזעים והאקלימים, all the races and the climates. נכון הדבר לרדת לסוף דעתם של העמים והקיבוצים השונים. Really, the right thing to do is to fully understand where these other nations are coming from. כמה שאפשר ללמוד את אופיים ותכונתם. You should learn their nature and their culture. למען דעת, I'm saying culture here, למען דעת איך לבסס את האהבה האנושית על יסודות המתקרבים למעשה. In order to better know how to reach out to them and to love them and to talk to them, right? And Jacob does this in a beautiful sense, in a beautiful way. He embodies this, right? When he's talking to his Muslim brothers, he's using a certain terminology and certain words to create a bond, to show a familiarity, to really show where I'm coming from. I actually really do see you. And that's why I feel comfortable to critique you even, right? This is from love. This is not from hate. Because religion is central in the world, the spiritual world, and the physical world of the other world, of the other people, of the other nations. So he clearly is also talking about other religions. הוסיף הרב קוק, בלא אהבה פנימית ממעמקי הלב ונפש, להיטיב לעמים כולם, לא ניתן למלא את הייעוד המיוחד לישראל. Without this love, we can't fulfill our destiny. להביא דבר השם וברכתו לעולם, right? To promulgate God's word and his blessing to the world. ואין לחשוב שמא היחס החיובי לאומות העולם ודתותיהם יפגם בנאמנות לישראל. And we shouldn't worry that our positive relationship with the other world religions and nations will diminish Israel's loyalty. כי רק על נפש עשירה באהבת הבריות ואהבת האדם תוכל אהבת האומה להתנשא בגאון, אצילות וגדולה רוחנית ומעשית. Because only with true love, right? If we could actually embody that beautiful gift that we feel from God, if you could embody that to everyone else, only that nation could actually rise up in glory and reach its spiritual and physical greatness. Any comments, Yacobi Mugatu?
No. This is standard stuff.
Where are you living, dude?
I'm living where I'm living. This is standard stuff. I don't see anything so shocking.
First of all, he said Rove people see it as shituf is not a problem. He also goes through that with.
Okay, we addressed that. Okay, what else?
Okay, then I'm just saying he's streamlining Rav Kook over here. Right? We have no tolerance for idol worship. So we could do our special
okay. So Jan God, this is a very modern writing, but I have to say what he is saying is based on things that are obviously over thousands of years old.
If only there were people that were still alive then to continue this thought process and wisdom that really should have been erased. Right? We said this, right? We have to obviously raise the divine spark and light and understanding of the unification of God and rectify the world. That's why we have to stay clear from idol worship. That's why we have to destroy all things that have to do with idol worship, right? We are looking for that beautiful high-speed internet, right? We can't play with anything else but premium. וכדי שיהודים לא יגרו אחרי עבודה זרה, מצווה לבטא את קלונה של עבודה זרה וביזיון עובדיה. And that's why, and what Jacob does many times, because we can't tolerate, and we don't want any Jews to follow in the footsteps of idol worships. It is a commandment for us, right? Because even though we just had all this lovey-dovey stuff that Jacob was throwing up from, now he's saying we still have to make sure that we call out the disgrace of idol worship and those who worship it.
I read ahead.
So you're happier now. כפי הערך הראוי להעיר בנפשנו גדולה והטובה, והנחלה הקדושה אשר שפרה עלינו, שהבדילנו מן הטועים ונתן לנו תורת אמת, וחיי עולם נטע בתוכנו. Right? Because at the end of the day, we are still promised that there was a separation between us and those and others, and he gave us a true Torah and gave us and seated in us everlasting life. And we want to have access to that, right? We don't want to muddy the waters, so to speak. Right? We don't want to be messing with these, slow band internet. אך אם זאת צריך לדעת שלפי ערך נפשם של הגויים, ייתכן שבכך שהם נאמנים לדתם האלילית, הם מתנהגים כראוי להם. We have to realize, we have to see people where they're at. And someone that is acting properly within his context, then he's acting properly within his context. And that's why, like you said, it's a curve. It's graded. ייתכן שבכך שהם okay. מפני שבכל אחד מהדתות יש ניצוץ אור אלוהי, right? As we said, every religion has a divine spark in it that comes out in their operating system, so to speak, with how they conduct themselves, their spirituality, their physical life, how they deal with their society. They're in different levels. כשם שכוח הצומח אחד הוא ומתגלה בארז אשר בלבנון ובעזוב אשר בקיר, אלא שבראשון הוא בא בצורה עשירה ומרובה, ובשני בצורה ענייה ומעוטה. So he gives an example, just like there are two of these things could be alive and are being sustained by the life force. One of them could be a sycamore tree, or let's say a redwood tree, and other of them could be a sprout, a weed, or something that's coming out of a wall. Sometimes something coming out of the wall could be very strong and it could fill the whole wall, but clearly there's a difference with its vibrancy. כן אור הניצוץ האלוהי בא בגובה שבדתות ומאמונות באופן עשיר ודרך רוממה, ובירודה שבהן באופן מטושטש ובעוני ושפלות, right? If you're flying above the atmosphere, right, there's no turbulence. Lower down, there's cloudy weather, there's rain, there's issues, it's blurry. It's very much the crayon analogy that Jacob loves to mention. לפיכך גם לגבי הדת הלילית הנמוכה ביותר, even the lowest of the low, religions. You still can't come and say like, oh, this is really garbage. Question if he's talking about Mormonism, though, or at some point you have to be like,
you can't say of anything that it's completely garbage. This is the difference between monotheism and, frankly, a lot of mistakes that people, including Manichaean and sometimes our Christian brothers, fall into, which is the idea that anything exists which God wishes didn't exist. If God didn't want it to exist, it wouldn't exist.
Great, that's why we started, right? And while it's still here, then there's still a purpose.
Including the purpose may be that you might have to what you call it? You might have to cut it down.
Standard stuff, honestly, almost sounds like America's New Age. Great. I hope we get to the place where it's all standard, that we all see each other as beautiful, loving.
No. See, you didn't understand the last part of what he was saying. He said American New Age.
I mean, New Age. I know, but you're saying the New Age movement.
The problem becomes when you focus on these things as if they're the only thing, then people imagine, right, that it creates its own idolatry. It creates its own idolatry of niceness, of ecumenism. I'm not ecumenical. Everybody else's religion is wrong, and my religion is right.
Okay, but he didn't say that. He didn't say.
I didn't say that. He said. You, on the other hand, you like to skip the little parts that were.
What did I just skip? It could be that religion was relevant to them at the time, at that point of their culture, to raise them from their place they were in. Where we said there's a gradation. Some are better than others. Some we also have to realize are bringing with them, in their theological suitcase, there's things that are coming from 1,000 years ago. Right. And that doesn't even mean that inside there's a truth in some sort of ruling that they have. But true, it's obviously very difficult. And why practically, I know it sounds, I'm being maybe a little too optimistic, but what I would love, if we can have with our Muslim brothers, and we do with our Christian brothers and sisters already, a discussion of how to reform a holy text. Right. There's ways to do so, but that has been happening with our Muslim brothers, unfortunately, for quite a while. Okay. Okay, he's repeating the same thing.
I'll be right back.
Sure. I'll continue though in the meantime. B'derech klal, usually there's a correlation between the amount of realization of this this God and the level of morality. But sometimes, even though there's a very blunt realization, again, it's the wrong word for Hakshama, of this God, nevertheless, the religions of the leaders of those religions rose up to the occasion and still created a very moral society, right? You could say, like with the Buddhists or the Hindus, right? There's a lot of many statues that are very, very physical, and nevertheless, it seems to be a very, very moral. It obviously, in many senses, you can look back at the religion; they have many issues, but generally speaking, how we look at them today. And sometimes you had a religion leaders that were seemingly more abstract, yet they still created horrible things. Looking at this footnote to see if it's relevant to us. Okay, he mentions the other stuff here again. Okay. Any religion is better than no religion. First of all, yes, I mean, from that point of view, Yoav, right? You could say like, even if it wasn't true, that right, that makes sense. Yes, that's true. ראוי לאדם להמשיך בדתו, right? So the third chapter here is talking about should a man continue in the path he's on, right? Because we're aware of these other flotillas, right? So to speak, you're aware of these other religions out there. In theory, because of the restriction, the how strict we are, the severity of idol worship and this restriction, we should say that every Gentile should immediately leave his idolatrous religion. But practically, Rav Kook talks about that. That's not the case, right? That even these qualified few in the nations, in the world nations, that knew that God is the source of all, still didn't cancel out all these idolatrous actions. Because they knew that at that time the abstract idea of one God, of a unified God, is just it's too great, it's too out there, it's too hard for the people to understand. And we talk about this often, of how in our prayer we say, right, that in Isaiah it says that God makes good and makes evil, but in our prayer books we don't say that. We change that to good, because it's not that we can't understand that, it's a lot to take in, and definitely a long time ago. And without faith resting upon physical things that we call gods, and is strengthened by how do you say a pulchan, Jacob?
I don't even know what that word is. But where's pulchan? What?
Pulchan.
Pulchan? I have no idea what a pulchan is.
By
word.
by rituals, okay? By pulchanim are rituals. By pulchanim, right? It's strengthened by rituals around these physical gods. They wouldn't have been able to create a base, right, of moral values to raise their people and their religion. People that put, rocks or stones in their house to give blessing, when they would have the evil inclination to kill or murder or steal, right? They would look at their gods and they would stop themselves from doing so. And so by these actions, by these rituals, okay, that they did in their temples or in their homes, man in certain way was deterred from doing evil, right? And this goes back to the very utilitarian idea of this with regards to Yoav's summary: any religion is better than no religion, right? And if we had demanded at that time, no, leave all the gods, leave the Asherah, leave all these stuff, and just immediately accept the one God, right? It would just been too intense. And while we were trying to rectify the world, we would just create more damage, right? And we see this also in psychology, right? Even when trauma, when people are dealing with stuff, you can't just snap them necessarily back into reality. It's a process, right? You can't just pull them in. We also see this with food, right? If someone's starving and suddenly you give him tons of food, it's not necessarily going to heal him. While that's what he might want to do or what he wants to experience, it doesn't work out that way. He will not, right? This is sort of like why, even on the flip side, why Moses doesn't go into the land of Israel, right? Moses is on 220 voltage. You can't put that into a 120 voltage. And likewise, if the person of the vessel is not ready to comprehend these kind of ideas, right, then you're gonna burn the system, fry the system. לעומת זאת, אם המשיכו לשמור את חוקי דתם, יוכלו להתעלות בהדרגה עד שיזכו לעלות למעלה האמיתית של האמונה הנמשכת על ידי אורם של ישראל. But if they continue in their ways, as we see the whole world has progressed, thank God, slowly but surely we're all coming to this point of unity. לכן לפי ערכם יש לדת שלהם ערך דתי, and that's why there's religious value to the way they are participating. ומרחוק נוכל להכירם ולכבדם, על היותם מתקרבים לאור השם בפי דרכם. Merachok, and that's probably what Jacob wants to stress on. from afar, right? I'm not going to have to be this kumbaya conversation. Yes, I understand that it all comes from the source. And that's why I hope from a distance that I can respect their journey. And I hope they slowly come closer towards God, whether it's the Baha'i, whether it's the Sikhism. ולחשוב שהם עושים כראוי להם בחזקתם במורשת אבות ובמנהגם שתקנו להם זקני אומנותם. And like you said, right, this is their ways. This is what מנהג אבותם בידיהם. And this is how they need to experience this. And we have to be sensitive to this. ביאר הרב קוק, שזו הסיבה המוכר לכך שאסור ללמוד תורה לנוכרי. This is why you can't teach a Gentile Torah. עד שאמרו, נוכרי שעוסק בתורה חייב מיתה. We went all the way to say that he's punishable by death. שנאמר, תורה ציווה לנו משה, לנו מורשה ולא להם. Right? This is an iOS system that was given to us, not to them. כי יש חשש, why? But not because we are being frugal, or, right? We only want to keep it for ourselves. יש חשש שהלימוד הגבוהים יזיקו למי שעדיין לא הוכשר לכך. Rather, it's the voltage issue.
That's the first time I've seen somebody say yaziku, because that's that, and I brought this up with Rabbi Burton. That's my main concern, right? That especially by people who are like, oh, anything you learn, it's fine. But there is this concept of Torah being tiflut to the wrong person for the wrong reason. It's Sam Hamavet.
Well, right. You could look at it. Yeah, correct. Right. So I'm saying, so like, and you're saying the focus also on the word yaziku, right? Which is more, it's damage, right? It literally.
Yeah, it's not just that we think this is something that they shouldn't do. It's that we believe that the commandments of God, the way he's set up the world, I really like the cancer analogy, right? You love your heart muscles. You love your brain cells, right? Nerve cells. But you're a nerve cell in the wrong place, heart muscle cell in the wrong place, it's cancer. It'll kill you.
100%. And now, Jacob, just to people should realize, this is why Jacob has been very adamant about discussing, or the conversations about Kabbalah, right, are, when discussed, are generally kept vague. And I would say Yosef does a better job at this, because I feel more loosey-goosey about this. Nevertheless, still, we refrain from going deep into this conversation. I was just having a conversation with a rabbi now that reached out to me that wants to get involved with Bnei Noach and do some sort of school. And I was talking to him about how, like, I don't get into the Partsufim and the Sferot and, like, the correlations, because, there's, as you said, that could be damaging Torah. And that doesn't mean, right? That doesn't mean, that we discussed in the past, do I know how to learn more Torah? Yes. But the question is how it's happening, the context it's happening, who's teaching that Torah, right? So because otherwise you're playing with a loaded gun.
I have to say, to what N Theory Go says, like, look, the question is, where are you on the mountain and which way you're facing? And I think the Torah gives a very clear path forward. Just as Christianity is a step up from Hinduism, right? Judaism is a step up from Christianity. The question is, which way are you facing? And you have to be facing, I think what's most clear is you have to be facing towards the God of Israel. And if you're not facing towards the God of Israel, you're facing away from the God of Israel, which I have to say you can do within Christianity as well. Then you're turning your back on God.
Yeah, but Malachi says that ultimately God is aware that he's still being.
Again, a person has bechira. A person has a capacity to turn towards God or away from God. And that bechira is yesodi, whether the person was born in rural Uttar Pradesh, right, where everything around them is all manner of idolatry, and all manner of, I mean, some of the things that happens in some of these societies. I hate to be vulgar, but just to give an example that somebody was talking about, which really does happen, right, is people literally sell their children into sex slavery in places in Pakistan and in India and in the Far East. People sell their children into literal sex slavery, and that is an accepted part of the culture. It's not, oh, this person is a bad person. That's what the culture teaches.
Jacob, you are 100% right. And the whole caste system, and even though it's less intense today, it was.
See, this is the problem. The caste system, like, at least we have Levi, Cohen, Levi Yisrael.
No, I was talking about specifically in the Eastern
specific
religion.
types, but but the problem with Protestantism is they don't have a caste system.
So Rav Melamed gives us an example, right? Dugma lekach, of like where someone's not prepared. Nitan lilmod מהנוצרים, from our Christian brothers, שהטיפו לאהבה יתרה לבריות, right? A little excess on the love and grace. אבל כיוון שפנו לציבור שעוד לא הוכשר לכך, because you're talking to people that are not yet ready to understand fully these concepts, גרמו לתגובות נגד קשה שהובילו לשפיכות דמים מרובה בשם הדת. Ultimately, you had an extremely bloody religion because they're not knowing how to process this. Now, I'm going to skip most of this. I'm just jumping to this line over here. I thought you'd think it's interesting, Jacob. Rav Kook talks about שאין לך דבר המפסיד את יסוד השלמות החברה האנושית כהשפעת עניינים נעלים בהמון שאינו ראוי לקבלם, right? Taking very abstract truth and just giving it, allowing people the masses to have access to it.
Don't cast your pearls before swine.
Okay, there you go. ומי שחושב, כדוגמת הנוצרים, whoever thinks like the Christians, שיצליח את כל באי עולם, that he's managed to reach out to all people of the world, על ידי מה שילעיט אותם ממוסר התורה, what he learned from the Torah ethics, he's using to have them follow them. קודם שהוכשרו לכך, before they have properly been oriented and trained for this, לא ירד כלל לעומק הכוונה הטובה האלוקית, didn't fully go down to the depth of understanding what the God's goodness is. והראיה, שתחת המסווה של ואהבת לרעך כמוך, הלכו במות תופת לשרוף אנשים. Right, so under the gaze of love thy neighbor, nevertheless, we had, you had people being burnt to a crisp.
Okay. Yoav asks a brilliant question. And I mean, it's really struck me. Today is Wednesday, or usually it's still Wednesday here. I don't know if it's still Wednesday in Eretz Yisrael.
Yeah, it's still Wednesday.
It's still Wednesday, and it just struck me as very interesting that you're a Levi, and Hashir Shahayu HaLeviim
El Nekamot.
That's what they were singing on Wednesday.
The God of vengeance. Okay, but that when I said it's loaded, because there's a difference between biblical.
It's not loaded. It's not loaded. El Nakomot Hofia.
Meaning.
The
trend is that all religion will gradually move towards a more abstract and more moral understanding. וזה נעשה מפני שגם בתוך החושך של עבודה זרה, יכול להימצא יחידים טהורי לב שירצו להוכיח ולהטיב דרכי עמם, ומתוך שמכיריהם שהאור האלוהי האמיתי הטהור הוא יותר גדול מכוחם, ידריכהו על פי ערכו בנימוסים טובים, ומנהיגים שמביאים אותו להשלמה יותר טובה בעתיד. Which I qualify Paul beautifully in that as a beautiful man who is doing God's work. And, I think like Rav Kook is clearly talking about people like that. I think you would concur.
Which Paul are we talking about? Both of them?
Pastor Paul Vanderklay?
Both of them. I mean, it seems, let's face it, Paul of Tarsus has inspired more people to learn Torah than certainly I have. I still call him Baal of Tarsus.
I know. I was going to say, come on, Jacob, you're going soft on me. After some time, ימצאו דרכים לפרש את דתם באופן עמוק ומופשט יותר. given time, like Father Stephen DeYoung, they will be able to, and Jordan Peterson, and the conversations in the Roundtable in the Exodus series. Given time, they will, with more facilities and more tools, even young, they will be able to understand more deeply their Torah. And
honestly, I was thinking about how Paul is at ARC with Christian Baxter, and I was like, how come Chezi didn't get a invitation to ARC?
It's okay.
Chezi would have been great at ARC.
Are you asking me if I sat in my room for 24 hours and cried? Yeah, sure. Okay. But, I process it that way. Okay. Hanatzrut v'Islam. These are short little snippets on it because he has his whole chapter getting deeper into each one. Christianity and Islam.
No, you had to buy tickets if you got an invitation. You couldn't buy a ticket if you didn't get an invitation.
And I guess I wasn't part of the cool kids.
Yeah.
So above all these other religions are the Christian and Muslim religion, Islam and Christianity, which are clearly inspired by the Tanakh, right? The Hebrew Bible, and from Israel. And they are closer to the divine light of God. And right, as he just mentions again, it seems like they're Shayum Manhigei v'Chachmei Nasrut, right? So he doesn't keep it only as the leaders of Christianity, which would be, let's say, Jesus and Muhammad in Islam, but rather their leaders and their wise men as well, right? So he's spreading here the love of God's providence on top, which is, for example, why, according to some, Peter established a prayer that we say in our prayers, right? So we could, of course, bring in these things that have come through different channels.
Just to clarify, there is a midrash which Rabbeinu Tam believed was a correct midrash, was an ancient midrash, which says such a thing.
Because they were trying to uplift people, base each person the way in accordance to their needs. They could do the miracles, right? And that's awesome. Now, but they're lacking. They do not recognize the centrality of Israel here to Tikkun Olam would be, well, here's not Berchot Olam, it's to manifest his blessing to the world and to reveal his word. Rather, they talk about changing them, surpassing them. Of course, these are broad strokes. We're not talking about to the people in this corner that we had thousands of hours of conversation for. We know we love you. We love you too. We know you love us. It's all good. And because of this, we have there's another issue. שאין בדתות אלו הדרכה להשתמלות מתמדת, שיכולה לרומם את האנושות לאין קץ, וממילא אינן יכולות ליצור מרכז שסביבו יתאחדו כל בני ישראל, right? There isn't this like a concept, in a certain sense, they feel like that happened. By the way, you could challenge this, right? They could say like the second coming is, something that we're still working for, and the last Mahdi is something that we're still working for. So this line to me is a little problematic. You
do realize you keep on talking about the Mahdi. The Mahdi is only Shia. Vast majority of of Muslims don't believe in the Imam Mahdi.
I'm down the Kavslut. And that's why it must be that given time, Christians and Muslims will be cleansed from their hatred of Israel, and will then be able to return and lishov,
draw water,
draw from the source of the Israel faith, and it will
from the fountain of comfort.
From the fountain of comfort, exactly. Okay, 1 second. Okay, interesting. In the Shmona Kvatzim, right? באמונות הנוטות מכלל התורה, the religions that come from
What's
the Torah.
Shmona Kavatzim?
Also Rav Kook.
Okay.
כמו האמונה הנוצרית והמחמדנית האסלאמית, it's a cute name to call Muhammad, Hamudi. אין עיקר ההרס, it's the main venom is not their concept of God. שהוא שונה ממה שהוא נכון להיות על פי יסוד אורה של התורה, which is still different from what it's supposed to be in the Jewish religion. Rather, but that's not the main focus. Rather, it's what comes out of it. Harisat mitzvot hamasiyot, right? The destruction of the commandments. Bitul tikvat ha'umah, the triyat hashlema. Okay, there's also a destruction of the belief in faith. We spoke about this a lot in the concept of redemption, right? That people can't be redeemed. There's a question of like in the world to come. So there's other issues that these religions promulgate. אמנם גם עתה שרבים מהם שונאים את ישראל ועדיין לא תראו את אמונתם בכל שם מצי אלילות. Well, we're still in a place where there's a lot of hatred. People might have noticed. Some people had some nasty comments online about Israel. יחד עם הביקורת על המעשים הרעים הנובעים מכך, even though we should come out against that, still ראוי לכבד את יסודות האמונה והמוסר שבתם. We should still respect what's undergirding their religion and their morality. שעל ידם הצליחו לרמם אנשים רבים למדות טובות יותר ולאהבת השם ויראתו, because still nevertheless they managed to uplift many people to better deeds and better actions and loving and fearing of God. ולכן מצווה על בני הדתות הללו ללכת בדרכי מחוקקיהם המוחזקים באומתם לאנשי קודש לפי החם ותוכנם. And that's why keep on going to church, keep on going to, obviously don't go to a crazy pastor and don't go to an extreme imam, but the idea is that you should continue in your healthy ways in your relationship with God. וכן ראוי לכל אדם שלם בדעת להשכיל כי העוסקים בהם על פי מסורת שבידיהם הם עוסקים בעבודה השם לפי ערכם. And anyone should know that any serious pastor or serious imam is doing God's work in his way. בנוסף יש לראות בהם התקדמות של שלב נוסף בתהליך זיכוך האמונה והמוסר. We should see them as another level, another point of zikuch would be to
refinement.
To refine. Morality and faith, moving again from this physical realized God into the understanding of pure worship of the unified God. האם ראוי לאדם להמיר דתו? Should a guy change his religion? כתב הרב קוק, שאין ראוי לאדם, or convert, שאין ראוי לאדם change his religion. What am I talking about? שאין ראוי לאדם להמיר את דתו. כי כל דת מבטאת גם את האופי החברתי והלאומי שעל ידו התגבשה. A person shouldn't convert because each religion expresses a specific social and cultural and national entity that has coalesced. ועוזב אותה בוגד במשפחתו ובעמו ובערכים הטובים. And someone's leaving him, he's abandoning his whole context. ואם ברור שהדת שעליה הוא עובר נחותה מבחינה אמונית ומוסרית מדתו הקודמת, הרי הוא הולך אחורנית ומגדיר אור נפשו לבד ממה שהוא מסלף אורחות ומוסרו לגמרי. הוא בוגד באומתו אשר תפחה אותו וגידלה אותו, והוא ראוי להיקרא נבל ולא ינקה רע. And someone that also decides to leave that religion, right? I'm Muslim, and now I want to become Hindu, or I'm Christian, I want to become Hindu. Why are you stepping backwards? אמנם אם הוא ממיר דתו מדעת אלילות לנצרות או Islam, but if it's the reverse, if you are, you're experiencing some,
you're coming from a pagan.
I was going to say secular Koranism, but yeah, it's their own thing. If you're coming from a pagan religion, right?
And becoming a Christian or a Muslim.
Right, then it's different because he could potentially be moving up, right? The ladder, the refinement ladder. ייתכן שיצמח מכך תועלת לאנושות ולעמו, שכן הוא עובר לדעת שקרובה יותר לשכלול האדם. Right? מפני שההכרה באחדות השם יתברך תביא על כל פנים ברכה לעולם כולו. Once we understand the unification of God's name, this brings blessing to the whole world. אומנם אין הדבר מבורר כראוי, right? We still don't fully understand, grasp this idea of unification, מפני שגם הנצרות והאסלאם אינן יכולות להביא את הצלחת האדם לתכליתה. Christianity and Islam both have not yet managed to bring people, man to its final purpose. כי אינן יכולות לרכז סביבן את כל הגוונים והעמלות שבכל הדתות והעמים, because they can't unify all the different colors and flavors of the other religions. ואזי ייתכן שעדיף שלא יבגוד בדתו, אלא יתרומם בתוכה למדרגות גבוהות יותר של אמונה ומוסר. And that's why, because they can't unify all these things, and rather he just stay in his lane and do his thing. ניתן להביא דוגמה מהדת ההינדית, שאומנם יש בה אלילות, right? In Hinduism we have idol worship, אולם כיוון שיש בה זרמים שמדגישים את המקור האחד, rather ultimately they talk about Brahman, right? That's also in the back over there, מחנכים למוסריות עמוקה, עזיבתה לטובת נצרות או אסלאם. עלולה להיחשב כירדה. So leaving, if you are someone that is participating in the Hindu religion, and you are one of those people that have this understanding of the unified source behind all things, then it could be a mistake for you to then become a Christian or a Muslim. וכפי שאירע לרבים מאלו שעברו לאסלאם שהזיקו לעצמם ולעמם יותר משאילו. And those that converted, assuming not forcefully, ended up causing damage. כיוון שבכל המרת דת יש בגידה במסורת הטובה שקיבל אדם ממשפחתו ומעמו. There's always a betrayal of what you received from your people. גם הגיור לישראל מורכב. Even converting to Judaism, to Israel is complicated. ולכן אמרו חכמים, קשים גרים לישראל כספחת. Converts for Israelites, for Jews, is a very difficult thing. It's like some sort of like an injury that one would have. אלא שהואיל ואמונת ישראל מביאה ברכה לכל העולמים. But because the faith of Israel brings blessing to all the world, והגר חפץ להצטרף לישראל כדי להוסיף להם כוח לטובת כל האנושות, and a convert wants to join them and then be able to perpetuate that blessing to the rest of the world, אין בכך בגידה, then there's no betrayal, because ultimately he's bringing back sustenance and what's shefa, abundance to the world. יתרה מזו, במשך הזמן הוא או זרעו, as time continues, him or his offspring, בזכות מוצאם, יוכלו להבין יותר לנפש האומה ממנו יצא. This is a beautiful line. The convert, because of his origin, could better understand the nation he comes from and the soul of the nation. ממקור ישראל יכול להשפיע עליהם דעת ומוסר וברכה כפי המתאים להם. And he then could relate to them and use the language that's more relevant for them to hear. Right? We have to, as we say, חנוך את הנער לפי דרכו. How did we go so wrong with Esau and Jacob, right? They're both living in the same house. If they're both raised the same way, one could have a reverse reaction, right? He ends up going off, getting mad, and instead it could be one needs tough love, one needs cuddles. It depends.
I have placed before you good and evil. Life and death. What? I have to leave in another 15 minutes.
חזון האמונה ועתיד הדתות, right? The vision of faith and the future of the religions. התנועה הכללית של האנושות היא לכיוון חיובי. The general movement, orientation of humanity is in a positive direction. מהבנת נמוכות ומוגשמות להבנות גבוהות ומפשטות. From very basic and low level understanding of the world to more higher and more abstract understandings of the world. ומתפיסה מוסרית שמגממתה הישרדות ולשאיפה אידיאליסטית, להוסיף טובה וברכה לחברה. And from an understanding of morality which was more about survival to this idealistic push to add and blessing and goodness to the world and to society. מאמונה אלילית לאמונה בהשם אחד, from believing in multiple gods into believing into one God. תהליך זה מורכב מאין ספור בחירות של אנשים, from multiple, countless decisions that people made, achievements and failures that have to do with suffering and wars, and it happens within national and religious structures.
Mark, I don't really understand what you're asking. So, like, there's a whole discussion going on in the hive mind, which is, first of all, I have to say, Judaism is neither Gnostic nor materialist, and it's not perennialist, and it's not how do you call the people who are like, it's my religion or no religion at all. The fact is, as Jan God put it, the rabbis are very meta. Man, rabbis are so meta. And as RJ put it, man, rabbis are so rabbis, my dude. yeah, when it comes down to it, and this has been a discussion I've been having with Twitter with regarding to IVF, for example, which Kel Zeldin has been railing against, right?
Railing against IVF?
Yeah. Oh, Catholics are very against IVF.
Does miracles.
But again, you have to understand that there are downsides to IVF, which Catholics bring up a lot of downsides. Yeah, and these are real downsides. So, for example, people who create more embryos than they actually implant, and what do you do with those embryos? So you have to be careful, and you have to probably the best thing to do is to only create as many embryos as you are going to. And
assuming that's your only option.
And that's your only option, and right? So
right, obviously halakha deals with this as well.
Right, and this is the thing with the differences that we have, right? So actually, did you see Grok's answer to my question about Rav Moshe and the Satmar Rav?
No.
It was very interesting. So last night, Grok 3 came out, and I asked Grok, I wanted to see what Grok would say. The answer Grok 3 gave, I was shocked at how detailed and good it is. And I put it in general chat on my Discord, right? It goes into great length into the differences between Rav Moshe and the Satmar Rav. The Satmar Rav said that IVF is forbidden because it creates mamzerim, because which is part of the is part of the Catholic argument that you're interfering in the natural marital relations. Especially, this was back in the 1960s when the only reason they really did IVF was because the husband didn't have fertile sperm. They would use somebody else's sperm, right? And the Satmar Rav said this is forbidden, and Rav Moshe said that it's permitted. Well, we see that after many years, even in Satmar, it has slowly become more accepted to be lenient and allow IVF.
In certain cases.
In certain cases, it has to be particular. And frankly, I think surrogacy is still a huge problem. There's lots of problems. And look, Kale is not crazy when he says, having children is a gift from God. You're not owed children. Many people never had children.
Sometimes Abba says no.
Sometimes Abba says no. Sometimes Abba says no. Right?
I want to finish, and we're almost there.
Okay.
All right, we said this is part of moving this direction. Was part of it includes suffering and wars, and it happens in all different kinds of structures, national, religious. And as we decide to pursue truth and goodness, so we progress faster with less suffering. All men and each nation according to their choice. And in the middle of this process of ascendance is the Jewish people, who was selected by God to reveal his light and blessing to the world. And according to the size of his mission, right, his responsibility, that's what the election means, right? There's nothing magical in the DNA. So as long as his path and his way, and much are his suffering. Great are his trials, and great are his hamikshalim, and the stumbling blocks in front of him. And our great his redemption eventually, please God. Because with it, the world slowly becomes redeemed. Till the belief in God will be nachlat kol hanashut, will be the inheritance of all man. Shene'emar, as it said in Isaiah, v'nizgav Hashem lavado bayom hahu, ve'alilim kalil yachalof. Hashem will be one, and the idols will be vanquished, will disappear, will pass from this world. V'ne'emar, as it says in Zechariah, ve'haya Hashem lamelech l'kol haaretz bayom hahu yech Hashem echad u'shmo echad. As we say, in that day God will be one, and His name is one. V'akach אנחנו מתפללים בעלינו לשבח, להעביר גלולים מן הארץ ואלילים קרות יחרטו נתקן עולם במלכות שדי. And slowly but surely God will have this all pass from the world. אולם אין שאיפה שכל העמים והדתות יתבטלו. But now again, just to stress, having said what we just read right now, where it says like all these things should disappear, we don't want all these religions, and Jacob, you might disagree with this, to disappear. שכן לכל דת גוון מיוחד שמבטא את המיוחד שבאופי של העם שבו היא נוצרה. Each religion has its own flavor that defines its special character and how it was created. לפיכך החזון הוא שכל דת תתנקה מכל פגמיה ותגלה את הדרך המיוחדת שלה בעבודת השם ובהוספת ברכה לעולם. Rather, as I said in the past, we hope that when the temple is built, the world religions will come with their theological suitcase, and it could be tweaked, cleaned, in order that it could still be expressed, because there's so much that we have to learn from our Christian brothers, and we've got to learn from our Muslim brothers and other religions. We don't want that to disappear. And in it, there is another expression and vision and understanding of the Master of the universe. Of course, it needs to be cleaned from idol worship. As kefi shene'emar, we want to make sure that by them orienting their religion properly, right? That doesn't mean they become Jews. It means the Noahide Christians or the Noahide Muslims, right? By doing that, they will bring even more blessing to the world. Kefi shene'emar, as Zechariah says, "Ve'esarti damav mepiv v'shekutzav meben shinav v'nishar gam hu le'Eloheinu." Ve'esarti damav mepiv, taking out the blood from his mouth, the murderousness, removing all this hate and violence and from man. Right? As Zechariah is saying, how I will remove and I will refine their religion. ואז הוא נשאר גם הוא לאלוהינו להוסיף בך לעולם. כמו שנאמר, כי אז ההפוך אל העמים, שפה ברורה לקרוא כולם בשם השם ולעבדו, שכם אחד. As Jacob and I constantly quote Zephaniah 3:9, that eventually God will bring all people together to speak in a pure speech or clear speech. Everyone will sanctify God's name and in one accord, and really it could be like shoulder to shoulder standing together.
Yeah. And that was a very good place where I usually end my streams because I have to leave soon. Okay. Sam is here.
I'm going to end it because I'm going to read.
It's already finished.
Oh, it's over. Okay. Is it? No.
So Sam says, in general, I admire Judaism's whole structure of having religious leaders make difficult judgments and the community mostly listen. And I think End Theory Go, who hasn't been here much apparently because he's one of the few people who aren't a moderator yet, should outlier cases maybe not be talked about as much, though? Feels like we're making room for the margins to take hold of the center. Yeah, look, this is why you need things like decisors and general rules, and then you need people to be able to go and do relevance realization and see what's relevant when. And so, hachacham einav berasho, right? A wise person has eyes in his head is the literal translation, and the pshat, the first level translation, is that a person actually looks forward But a less literal translation is that a community should have a chacham, should have a wise person that people can turn to. Okay, my dear man, I have to go.
I'll end it because mine is still running.
Well, I didn't end it.
I thought you said the stream was over. Sorry.
No, I was saying the stream is over, as in stop with your silly Zionist texts.
What Zionist text? What did I say was Zionist? It was so good. You can leave. I'm going to finish this thing up.
Okay, you have fun.
You might
want to drop the link and let Sam come on.
Yeah, I could let people come on.
Bye-bye, people.
I'm not staying so long, but if someone wants to jump on. That's it. Even though we just said, together with this, having said that it's beautiful that we want each nation to cling to his religion. Hey, Sam, I'm just ending this portion over here. He said, even though we want everyone to realize their unique religion and connect to it within their own religion, nevertheless, everyone's still going to be connected to Israel and the center in Jerusalem, in Isaiah, coming up to the temple, the house of prayer for all people, and other classic Isaiah quotes that we've spoken about many times. And then there's just some side notes over here, but we don't have to get into them. What's going on, Sam?
Oh, not too much. I thought it was really interesting. I was listening to you guys on 2X, and you're a pretty fast talker, so that was a lot. And you're alternating between Hebrew and English in a way that is sometimes a little bit hard to follow, but I appreciate it. I mean, it's really interesting the way that Judaism can deal with other religions in a way that Christianity doesn't quite. Christianity, I think, this is of course coming from a Unitarian who, Unitarians invented Christian pluralism, but I think that was still generally a mistake. But Christianity is pretty all or nothing. And there are various shades of the all or nothing, but it's still pretty all or nothing.
Well, that's why what I mentioned over here is one of the claims over here is that's why it sort of sees it's seen as a failure because it's not managing to unify. It says like Islam and Christianity had an option to unify all people, but because it's all or nothing, it doesn't allow for the election of Israel is not every nation is elect, but they need to realize their strong. They need to realize their purpose. Israel is there to shine the light on everyone's election. And we're over there to offer tools for everyone to actually see themselves as elect, for the Muslim to actually see himself as what he's supposed to really be doing, and the Christian to really finally manifest himself as his true Christian, right? Which will, like I said, which will be clean from idolatry. But I would say that's really the election. It's in order to, I give this analogy in the past about every nation is a flower, right? We are the clear vase that has allowed you to make a bouquet of all these things together. And we're not trying to extinguish that divine light that's there. Obviously, and this is what I talk about Jacob when he says this is like standard stuff. This is not, to me, this is like redemption Torah, because this is not the language. While you could all these things have been spoken about in the past 2,000 years, but they were hidden, right? We all have the story of Elisha and Naaman when he tells him, go back. Yes, you could serve God, but go back and do your idol worship. I understand the context you're in.
Mm-hmm.
Now, not to be Zionistic, putting that aside, just the return to our land, and I think the only way we survive is if we, and I would even argue that has to do with, I'm trying to think if I want to bring this up, but I'll still bring it up with our reaction to October 7th. I think the whole world is sort of looking and saying like, if you are the nation of Israel, then like the wrath of then we see an evil, be the good, whatever that means, however that's supposed to manifest. And I think we constantly fumble. And I think that creates a tremendous amount of tension and anger and frustration, which is like disappear or be the people that the Bible was talking about. Like there's no middle ground. There's no like, oh, we're just, little people. So I think that like it sort of felt at this frustration, which is like now you have this opportunity sort of to, I mean, you could say the maps are changing around as it is. I still think we're in redemptive times, but we keep on fumbling. But it's not mainstream because for this book to come out and be talking about it so openly, right? You have to think about a generation ago, and even still today, people think about Christians like the enemy, bad, spitting, Muslim, bad. Like, I don't want nothing to do with that. People won't buy tiles that even have an X on them because it looks like a cross. Like, on the other hand, there's really a conversation that if you want to, actually start looking like what world peace looks like, you have to start talking with a language which is more inclusive and more understanding. And it's not like kumbaya or because I'm being progressive. It's just I'm going back to the sources and I'm saying this was always the conversation. Of course, pogroms, crusades, it just wasn't the thing we're discussing because it wasn't the place to discuss it because I'm running away and I'm trying to save my child. So I'm not going to stop and be like, well, what's the religious ramification for this Christian right now that's trying to kill me? But we have to, as I always say, we have to remove the exoskeleton of exile. And I think the same thing's happening in Christianity, which is like, there's sort of a redefinition happening online, right? Christian YouTube, TLC, all these things, ARC, which is like, what are we doing?
Mm-hmm. Help me understand the differences that you and Jacob have about Zionism. I know it's a big topic. But I still feel like I kind of know it, but I'd probably fail to articulate it.
Jacob sees Zionism, and to clarify, Jacob loves Jews. He wants the people in Israel to be safe, all the good stuff. Jacob sees Zionism as he sees it as a complete travesty. And he understands this by us, specifically secular Jews, deciding to create a country and then sort of stealing this concept of Judaism or taking the name Israel, even though this is a completely colonialist project. And he's saying that that's why there's no there there. This is just like Sweden in the Middle East. And that's why anytime it talks in the name of religion or the name of the Jewish people, it's doing so out of turn, and it has, and that's why it doesn't really have a right to exist from a theological perspective. That's his attitude, okay? In a nutshell. And because of that, things that Israel does or the way people act, like if you believe in that, and because of that, you're going to have soldiers in this territory. It doesn't matter that it's the tomb of the patriarchs. Nevertheless, you're getting Jews killed, and and that's your fault, and that's horrible that you're doing. I agree and disagree with him I believe in this idea called Chamarosh Mashiach, or the donkey of Messiah, or you could look at it also as Messiah, son of Joseph, where which is not limited to one thing. And the concept is that, first of all, Herzl and Ben-Gurion would be considered messianists today, as far as like the Overton window, right? They talk about we're here because of the visions of the prophets, like beautiful language like that, right? So and yes, Herzl was an atheist in the beginning, and he was thinking of converting, but eventually, ultimately, if you read his works, you see that he came back to his sources. He realized that this is the redemption of a people, and a people that's coming from a certain religion. Now, the return of the people to the land, right? I'm just trying to think how to go about this. There are, when the land starts showing fruit, when there's going to be over 600,000 people over there. There's many different indications why this could be considered like, through divine intervention. My argument to Jacob is, I don't know what you think miracles look like, but I would say like in 1948, coming back to the land, the 6-Day War, all those things are what miraculous things look like. And there's an idea which is like, we can't come back to the land until God wills it. And my attitude is, and others, who am I? Forget what I'm saying. The great rabbi's attitude was, this is what it looks like when he wills it, right? It looks like an insane thing geopolitically happening out of nowhere. There's people comes back to the land. Now, I don't know what the level of miracle Jacob is looking for. It could be that, like, he wants the temple to fall from the sky. And my attitude is the miracle of the third temple is when we want to build it. That is the miracle, that we came all together and we actually built it. That is happening top down together. And that's also the co-creation narrative is constant, right? So it's not just it's going to fall from the sky. I always joke about, from the professional perspective, all the infrastructure, the parking, how this is happening is just falling down from the sky, right? I'm saying we need internet, nevertheless, inside the third temple. Now, I do see what the secular community did in Zionism and its colonialist attributes. I don't see those as great. I see them as problematic. However, I see those as the inertia, the secular, the physical manifestation, which is called, could be seen as Messiah, son of Joseph, or the material, which is Homer in Hebrew, which is like Hamor, which is like the donkey. There's a material manifestation, as you need people actually to drain swamps, to fight wars, to do things before the spiritual could emerge, right? So this is sort of laying the groundwork. Now, to clarify, that doesn't mean I look at the secular in Israel as they're the donkey and I'm riding on top of it. Don't see that at all. I see them as, it's extremely holy what they're doing. It's just there are different roles. Now, once that gets manifest, or you could look at, God being seen as a warrior and God being seen as an old man, right? There are different ways how these things manifest. So while I agree with Jacob that its current version is not, that's not it, right? We're not there. We're not at the third temple. However, I think this is a stepping stone towards that. So that's why
preparing the way of the Lord, so to speak, or
footsteps of Messiah, right? So this is what it looks like. Now, I also think that we have to remember that, and I talk about this often, which is after the destruction of the temple and prophecy leaves us, and intuition leaves us, and the feminine leaves, and the ever evolving Torah, the Shekhinah, correct, that leaves. Then you have the rabbis go and say, "Give me the city Yavneh and its wise men, and I'm going to codify the Torah now." But that's a masculine, logical, static Torah, which was super necessary for 2,000 years. However, now we're back in our land, and we have to remember what it's like to imagine. And that's the only way the prophetic comes back, is through the imaginal. And that might look different. And it also might, even what we used to think as off the path, right? Or someone that has gone off because like we were in exile mode. We have to realize like, no, maybe this guy now, that because I've been so stuck in my ways of survival, I can't even imagine what it would look like to incorporate something new. I haven't tested that muscle. So Jacob, of course, has hard times with this, but I see Judaism, I see Zionism as an expression of that. And I think part of the issues are that the political power, the way it manifested in Israel, has the ultra-Orthodox Jews have tremendous political power. And because of that, when we say Jewish and democratic state, the Jewish element is expressed by the ultra-Orthodox, which causes a tremendous amount of tension within Israel itself, because are we going to how they define certain laws and how they define who's considered Jew and who's kosher and who's what's not. So that's why I believe there actually needs to be a separation of church and state currently, because, for example, there's no law about on Passover, right? Leavened bread. We're not eating that. Now, that's not a law, but most people, most hospitals, most people know to respect that. They decided someone wanted to make a law that you can't have it in any hospital, and if we see you, we're going to kick you out. Now, that's crazy, and people got very mad about that. However, on the Day of Atonement, there's no law to not drive or to fast. However, most of the country doesn't drive and fast because they want to do so by themselves. No one's telling them to do so, right? And I believe that we need to remove the religious from the political currently, because even though I believe that the political is still an expression of the religious, as in there is a divine political movement. The king itself could be divine, right? Nevertheless, in its current version, I think it's ultimately creating tension, and it's not oriented properly. And that's why there should be a separation until it happens naturally bottom up, because it's a very religious country, and a conservative country, and they want that. They don't want to cram down, and they definitely don't want to cram down in the version of Judaism as experienced for a 200-year period in Europe, right?
Mhm.
Now, that's amazing, and they held the torch and all the amazing stuff. But I am a Hebrew back in his land, and I want to manifest our universal name, which is Jeshurun. And I've done Jacob, and I've manifested Israel as a nation, but we have a destiny to manifest, and it requires a different language, a different kind of Torah, one which is like, scary. Like I call it, I don't call it, rabbis call it Messianic Torah, which in one ways could be more strict, in other ways could be more lenient. But there's people that, I give an example of, so the rabbi I was actually quoting also talks about how the resurrection of the dead could potentially be achieved by technological advancements, right? And then the question is, it will be deemed the resurrection of the dead if doing so with proper orientation and in the name, in heaven's sake. If it's done by corrupt, what's his name, Klaus Schwab, and the Davos, things like that.
It's necromancy.
Correct.
Yeah.
And that's it's sort of up to us what we manifest into these things. Now, they're coming out with engineered meat, right? So there's very big ramifications for dietary restriction law, kashrut, things like that. Exactly.
If it's manufactured, how many hooves does it have?
I'm saying no hooves. Exactly. You're just taking it from a kosher animal. You're taking this cell. Now the question is this cell now considered meat, and I can't have it with milk, or is it not? Now, the rabbi came out and said, no, it's not considered meat. Now, there's going to be a reaction of people which says like, that doesn't matter, right? Now, you could look at that as like sort of quote unquote messianic times, right? Like, I don't need to eat any animals anymore. I can move towards like this vegetarian world while still getting my protein. First of all, there's a structure around it. There are many people that their jobs are to certify things for kosher or not. We're not firing all those people yet. So first of all, I'm not saying yes until I know that everyone's hooked up with a job. It's sort of like you're going to have lobbies of cab drivers fighting automatic cars, right? Because what about my job? But when you're talking about the truth of the Torah, it can't be denied by like, oh, because like it doesn't work with me right now. Or I'm like, and there's a sense of like, but I just came from exile for 2,000 years. I have this amazing thing called Judaism iOS. And now I know you're telling me that there's this iOS upgrade, but like, what am I supposed to do with this that I had for 2,000 years? And that's a scary conversation, but it doesn't mean that I close my eyes and I just insist that like I have to remain with this operating system. Definitely when the society around me, which are Jews that are in this land, are like not speaking the same language. And then you have to ask yourself, like, does this kind of interaction ultimately lead to being expelled again? Heaven forbid. Yeah. That was a lot.
There's a lot. I mean, I was suspecting this, but it's touching on a lot of topics that, TLC's been interacting with recently. Like, it's basically a question about the re-enchantment of politics. Is as best as I can understand it. And you're saying like, hey, it's starting to look kind of enchanted to me. I don't know about you, Jacob. And Jacob's like, no, I need, something that is like kind of a categorical difference, a categorical sign from God or something like that.
Like
before,
like 2 strikes from Iran of like a total of like 500 ballistic missiles and no death or damage to anyone. Is that what it looks like? When people say like, that would be crazy.
But if it's technological, is it a miracle? And that's sort of like what you were saying about the resurrection there. If it's technological, is it a miracle, or are those two things non-overlapping categories? And that's similar to IVF. Is IVF like, one of the barren women in the Old Testament becoming pregnant again? Or is IVF sort of this heinous technology that is taking God out of the human reproductive process or something like that?
I would argue that the Talmud and even Maimonides pushed their imagination, right? Maimonides talks about like this metal flying bird in the sky, right? He's like, can you even imagine such a thing? The Talmud talks about someone that could flip his hands and write with both hands with pencils in each hand. And like, that's like a printer. And it talked about IVF. A woman goes into a ritual bath, but there was still semen that was left over before, and somehow she got pregnant. So the rabbis were trying as much as they can to see how far can we take these concepts. I would argue that they would continue with these things today. And that's why I rail, and Jacob fights with me about this all the time. And he constantly tries to bring in you or Yosef when he says that I'm like a crying wolf with regards to the advancements of biotechnology and AI with world religions, and how and I always go towards like, if you're like, forget IVF, if I could with surgical precision, right, determine with my genes and my wife's genes, the fastest of our genes, the tallest of our genes, the strongest of our genes, I'm going to make a super baby. Why would you not do that? Why would I not give myself at the very least clone parts? Am I now? You're not allowed to skydive according to Jewish religion. Can I now, because I can make spare parts? Now he says like digitizing consciousness, that's never going to happen. Are we really like not at all in that world or something like that? And even if it's something akin to that, or even if you could fool people that that's what happened, there's still ramifications for that. If I could have an AI that tells me more about your microaggressions, how does that change how I'm thinking about your thoughts, how I'm conversing with you? If I could tweak my IQ, what does it do to relationships? So, and how people study Torah and understand things. There's a whole category in Judaism, which is called Marit, in Jewish halakha, which is called Marit Ayin, which means this thing is allowed, but if you do it, someone might think you're doing something wrong, and therefore you can't do it, right? Because what someone's perception is going to be. Now, which doesn't exist in all in the Ethiopian Judaism. They just decided that that's...
It's interesting. Paul has similar things about that, and about vegetarianism in front of people who are vegetarians and stuff like that. When Paul, the Apostle Paul, is talking about not eating meat sacrificed to idols, he basically does if people know that it was sacrificed to idols, then well, you shouldn't eat it. But maybe it's okay if you don't do a forensic analysis and it's just on your plate and you don't think too hard about where it came from and you're just sort of ignorant of the thing. Yeah.
Now, if I could be aware, like technically aware, right? Because I have my AI meta glasses, it's telling me your microaggressions. He's about to lie. He didn't mean it. Things like that. Are all those categories, they don't matter anymore because now I know what your intention is. Those are huge changes. And my stresses to the rabbis that I speak to is like, at the very least, like play around with, even it happens in 50 years from now. How would you change it? What would you do? Who would be the rabbi you would speak to? Do you have any idea of how to even move forward? If the answer is like, to change that would be like, that would be crazy to do. Okay. How would you do it? And you're living and you could see this with how these rabbis even answer questions about AI, where you see how they're so disconnected. Like, oh, it depends what the programmer, like, there's no programmer. There's not a man pressing a button at this point. Like, you have to move past that. So I think we're in a completely new context, and Jacob doesn't see it that way. I think he sees like, this happened in the past, and Judaism knows how to respond to these changes. And I would claim that A, the rate of change is way faster. 2, the rate of change is so fast that you have a problem where you have generations that are experiencing different halakha that are living together. It's one thing, that's what my dad did, but I do things differently. It could cause the creation of like, 1 second, I did it 20 years ago, I did it this way, now I'm doing it differently. Like, but I was excommunicated. Like, think about you, for example. Think if they decided in X years from now, listen, by the way, Trinitarians, Unitarians, it's not a big deal. Is someone calling you and apologizing you when they kicked you out and embarrassed you and your family and made your son question like his father's relationship with the church? Where are all those people? What about all the trauma you caused? You're like, what do we know? And I'm not even asking for change, but at the very least, do we regret some of the actions of the Crusades? Do we regret burning people on the stakes? And those were said by great people. So maybe let's just slow our roll. Maybe let's just, like, at the very least, maybe there's room for us to like doubt ourselves, or like, I don't know. I just think like we're I don't know where those leaders are, which are, and that's why Paul is always refreshing, right? Because you hear someone that's just like down, like Paul Vanderklay. He's just down to schmooze, down to talk, and like it doesn't seem like he's, the curiosity makes you feel that this is someone that's genuine, that's someone that sees me, that's someone that's interesting in talking to me, and why I think estuaries are very popular, because it allows someone to really be seen and not judged, but still feel that this is happening at the very least within a religious, maybe religious is the wrong word, in a godly setting.
Yeah.
But you could even say that TLC and the internet, right? This conversation that we're having, isn't this one step closer to what Zephaniah is talking about, of calling God's odd name in one accord? Is it not that the Unitarian and the Orthodox Jew are talking and agreeing agreeing about concepts, and then saying, "Oh, when you mean veneration, I mean this," and clarifying these words and what's the word? I'm forgetting this word again, but refining these concepts and these terms after 2,000 years, right? Very much like brothers that are looking for each other in the field. And we're aware that we are being sustained from the same source. How is that not like what the prophets were talking about? If you look back like 200 years, it would be a joke.
Mm-hmm.
And it's almost like, well, not that that's not enough, because we obviously want full redemption. But we talk about on as Passover comes nearer, closer, we have a song called Dayenu. It would have been enough. We say it would have been enough if God just took us out of Egypt. And it would have been enough if he just crossed the ocean, all the way to. So like, can we not stop and smell the roses for a second and be like, is this not amazing? Is this like, would people not, if you showed some of this conversation 500 years ago, would he not think like, wow, this is messianic times? And if it's not, what are Jacob, or what are you guys thinking it looks like? Because it's not people with wings, and it's not like halos on our head. So what is it that we're looking for?
Yeah, that's really interesting. Like, I'm trying to come up with some sort of like Christian parallel, or like, I mean, America always struggles with its self-understanding of the relationship between politics and the divine. Like, at some level, America is the most, separation of church and state, Constitution, First Amendment, etc. We've separated those two things. We invented the separation of those two things, and lots of other people have copied us and stuff like that. But yet at the same time, almost it's so core to Americans to think that we have some unique relationship with God among all of the countries on earth, and that the way that God is working through history is through America.
To be fair, at least you're putting your money where your mouth is, literally, where you write on your money, "In God we trust." Right. So to my point, what I was saying earlier, which the question was like, should a Christian or Muslim, right, leave his religion? And the answer was like, no. And then the question was like, well, what about like someone that's Hindu, right? Should he convert to Christianity? And then there's a question which is like, who's playing the best divine game in town, excluding Judaism right now for that purpose? That's what you're looking for, right? So if America was doing so successfully for a long time, then why not wear that crown proudly? You could argue now that that's not happening, obviously, but at a certain time, right? Like when the founding fathers are coming, when they're writing that declaration, right? When you have veritas as a value, when you're talking about things like the Urim V'Tumim on what is it, Yale or Oxford, then that's what your goal is, and that's bananas as far as humanity is concerned. Like God is sitting and smiling. How that manifests, just like we spoke about. I mean, that's the big responsibility we have right now with AI, right? Which is like, what are we doing with this right now? Hello, sir.
Hello.
I hope you're doing well, Yoav.
Yeah. Forgive me for the jumping in. I would like the two of you to go on with your very interesting conversation. I just want to reinforce the Chezi's comment about Israel being a miracle, because I think people who are like most of the audience of this broadcast were not into the details of how Israel came to be and how Israel came to stay. They tend to see a big picture and we'll see it as one miracle that can be underestimated because, Israel is a country. There are lots of countries. How did India came to be? How did
Armenia wasn't a country. They had a genocide. Their people got scattered all over the Middle East, and then they came back and reformed their country.
A nation or a country?
A country.
Yeah, so my point, seeing the big picture, and it is a small state in a very big world, and when you don't dive into the details, you don't see the miracle. For example, I had a conversation with an American friend sometime, and we're talking about the war of 1967. And he said, well, no wonder you won that war, because you had the latest American weapons, the most advanced American weapons, and the Arabs didn't. And that's not how it was. In 1967, we had no American weapons whatsoever. We had actually only some anti-aircraft missiles, the Hawk anti-aircraft
I would just point out, there's something miraculous about American weapons. I mean, we're pretty good at making some weapons, so don't discount that as a miracle in and of itself.
Yeah. But winning over so many well-equipped, the best Soviet weapons in a war within 6 days without American weapons. And then when you drill out to the details of the war, minute by minute, hour by hour, every minute there is another miracle. I mean, when you drill into the details, into the tactics of it, it's just one miracle after the other, happening in succession. Like the first minutes of the war, when the Israeli aircraft managed to destroy the
Air Force, Egyptian Air Force.
The air forces of 3 different countries in a few minutes. If you follow the details of those 10 minutes, every minute was a miracle. Because, I mean, there was supposed to be some defense to those air forces. There was supposed to be some intelligence. There was supposed to be some anti-aircraft defenses. Every minute, every detail was a miracle. So when you see one miracle in succession, minute after minute, and you go back to the war of 1948, the war that created the State of Israel. At day one, when we started this war, we had no weapons whatsoever. Absolutely nothing, because it was under British rule, and the British didn't allow us to have any weapons. I mean, it was illegal to hold even a pistol in your house. And then we were fighting the armies of at least three states, and for example, the Jordanian army was well equipped and trained by the British. It was a regular trained army. Not to mention the Egyptian army that was much bigger than anything else in the Middle East, not to mention the Syrian army and the Lebanese army and the help they got from the Iraqis. Not to mention the Palestinian population that was more numerous than us at the moment. I mean, you just cannot explain it without divine intervention. And then you go to the details of the war, day after day, hour after hour, it's just one miracle after the other. So it has become just for me as a secular, non-observant person. It just becomes undeniable. I mean, there is a point when you stand by the sea and you see the water parting, and believe or not, you just have to admit that something is happening. You just have no other logical choice. Like if I was sitting there by the Sea of Reeds and watching the sea part, I'm sure there was a perfectly logical explanation to it. Like if I had the synoptic weather map I would see the very unusual earth pressures building up. I could see if I had seismic detectors, I could see some tremors in the earth and some unusual earth movement. If I was sitting there, I would have been able to, even let's say if I was scientific as I am now, an hour or two before the event, I would be able to predict it. But since there is no denying the miracle, so that was my interruption, and excuse me for it. I will log
Not at
off.
all.
No.
You're enriching us, but this is also very much at, like, you know, that no one could see my face. You could only see my back, right? And seeing me in retrospect, and then looking at these details. And as I mentioned to Jacob, King Hezekiah, we were taught that he was a potential Messiah, but he didn't end up thanking God when he was saved. He just ended up taking all the credit for himself. And then, like, there's not realizing when, you know, we're told, return to me and I'll return to you. What does returning to you look like? Like, and as you'll be like, well, it just like, and this is why I argue with Jacob, like, I rather be early than late to the front lines, right, of history. Like, does it look like being in diaspora and just, I'm not even talking about levels of observance, and there's nothing to do with him personally. Just the whole, and this is what I challenge many of my clients when I have my shopping days with them. It's always, and we're spending a tremendous amount of money, and there's working, and I immediately challenge them. I'm like, you know, you're building a world which is closed in a loop. Like, you're working hard to be able to sustain this life, to send your kid to this good school that'll have the same exact education you do to come. I'm like, every day he prays about coming to the land of Israel, yet you're building a reality that will mean he doesn't want to come to the land of Israel. So, like, what are you doing? Like, how does this work? I went to the rabbi of my seminary when I studied, and I said, okay, so there are kids now that are like, my contemporaries are sending their kids to your school, right? I'm like, do you see that as a win? That after 20 years, your student sends his kid to the same school? Or was the win for your, because these are students that are coming abroad, right? They're paying $25,000 a year to come and study for 1 year, and then they go back abroad. I'm like, what's to study? What? To study the Torah, which is clearly focused on this land, talking about this land. I mean, before we're even given the Torah, where we're promised a land. That's what Abraham's promised. Yeah, everyone's gonna be blessed, but there's no conversation about Torah. You can even see it in the text when Moses comes to the people and says, after the Sea of Reeds, we're gonna go to a mountain, we're gonna accept stuff, and they respond to him, anything that God tells us we'll do, not anything that you say. That's because they say, like, yeah, we believe you that you're the savior to take us out of Egypt. I have no idea what you're talking about, a law, this and that. Let me hear that from the big guy. Who are you? And they wait to go to hear, like, okay, let's see what we're talking about right now. But that also wasn't promised. So I don't know. I feel like the connection to the land is clearly there. And it's also, if you build it, they will come. Like, there's, from many claims, monetarily speaking, culturally speaking, like, great. So if I have suddenly now, let's say there's 6 million Jews. Give me just the 1 million Orthodox Jews. If you move, 1 million people will change the demographic here and the culture here, and you'll have Supreme Court justices, and you'll have everything you want will be over here once you're here. But come, and it's like my same line about building the temple, and this has to do with the division that we have in Israel right now. Like with like the civil, like I would stress that what is called in Israel is not a civil war. It's called, and this is how it's referenced in Hebrew and all the news in the news outlet, Milchemet Achim, a war of brothers. Because we're closer than just civilians talking to each other. We're all brothers talking to each other. And like, you can't get more biblical than this, where the division in Israel is so intense that the left and the right are saying the left is calling itself Israel, and it's saying the right is Judah, and we should separate. Like, literally, are you trying to manifest the same biblical disaster you had? And like, when you see like the opposition coming and saying, like, quote unquote, like inviting America into our politics over here, like, why, like you bring in the Assyrian king, like we had that with Herod. It didn't really work out so well. We're bringing in like, so yes, I look at that also being just like we can manifest the archetypes. We could step in the shoes or manifest those archetypes of the forefathers and of Moses and of Adam and of Abraham and Jacob, we could also manifest the negative patterns again, and we could bring destruction again, and we could bring division again.
I mean, it just is making me think about how hard it is to make a shared people group that has a shared story and agrees upon not just sort of the, I don't know, moral or political significance of the story, but that the story like leaps up a register, right? It's touching the divine and religious aspects are intermixing in the story as well. And that's what, Richard Rollin wait a minute, Richard Rollin. Yeah, I said that right. And Jonathan Pageau are talking about when they do their universal history, right? They're like talking about, lots of people groups had like their shared stories, and they would often connect, some mixture, like the Vikings would have some, or the Christianized Vikings would have some mixture of like their pagan ancestry, their Christianization, and tying that back to the Bible story somehow, right? Well, we're actually this tribe that got lost and wandered up to Scandinavia, or we're connected to this figure in the Old Testament, and then the miracles of Saint Olaf and whatever, and now we're Christian, and like a mixture of political, military, ethnic history with occasional flashes of divinity or religiosity or supernaturalness or something like that, and that can make a people group, and it can tell you where you came from and where you are and where you're going, and that it seems like Israel right now is in a bitter, confusing dispute about how to do that with the present.
Most, I wouldn't say none, but like I would say what seemingly is unique about the nation of Israel is that it was born out of choice. Okay, a Japanese man doesn't wake up in the morning and say like, does Japan have a right to exist? Abraham comes, God gives Abraham a choice, and Abraham says yes. And in some sense, every Jew says like, why did you say yes? Like, it's a question we have to ask ourselves. Like, why? Like, what did I do? Like, why did I take on this story? And it's not like because this guy found this land and he built this house and that's how you do it. It's the story doesn't get more intense than the core. It's Hineni, right? Here I am. And it's every morning you sort of have to give yourself, here I am. And anytime you get challenged about like you don't have a right to exist from the river of the sea, there's a subconscious. I have to. Here I am again every time, because otherwise, what am I doing over here? Am I a colonizer? Like if the land is nothing and this is nothing, then like.
Well, if everything's nothing, then what's the bad part about being a colonizer? Right.
You're saying, but like even if you're, so you could be like,
yeah, I know what you're saying, but I'm saying I'm noticing that even in that structure, it's falling back to a narrative that's assumed as neutral, which is still saying colonizing is bad and taking other people's land is bad, and you shouldn't do that, right? Like I'm noticing, I'm pointing out that even in that sort of secular layer, there's a lot of liberal Christianity is really what I see in a lot of my liberal Jewish friends. And around, like locally in my real life, the Jews that I know are almost all on the liberal spectrum. Maybe some are sort of on the reform spectrum, but even then Jacob will tell you that that's just the conservative end of the liberal spectrum. And there's a big division in American Jewry, especially the left-wing side, over how to think about Israel. And it's becoming super polarized in the people that will have the flag in front of their temple that's basically an American flag, an Israeli flag, and almost like a F-16 flying in the middle, right? And like we stand with Israel, etc. And there are people in my neighborhood that have we stand with Israel signs and have since October 7th. And then I know Jews that are like very much I don't know, we're colonizers, we need to leave, we have nothing to do with that over there, except why do you care so much about it's like, even in there, we have nothing to do with that over there. They spend a lot of time and a lot of energy thinking about what's going on over there and how that connects to their identity and their sense of purpose and who they are and what they're up to. And I don't know. It's fascinating. Like another thing, I think I've probably told you this before. I don't think Jacob like fully, totally knows or appreciates how much I grew up in and how much my dad and my church and whatever was very much in that premillennial dispensationalism thing of the kind of evangelical Christians who thought that and still think somehow details to be filled in, but
Right.
in broad brushstroke, that what's going on with Israel is some kind of, I don't know, building the footpath of the Messiah's return, and some sort of apocalyptic nearness, and that affecting their political views about which party to vote for, how that party should interact with Israel, how we should treat and understand Jews, etc. And my dad is super all into that stuff still. And I sort of take a somewhat agnostic step back, although my dad would say what you said, better to be on the front lines of history, even if you're early, than to be caught on your back foot. And I just have a little bit more, I don't know. I've been told too many different stories about how this works that didn't come to pass. And so I'm not ready for version 4.0. That
Right.
doesn't seem to have much of a better track record of version 1.0 that when I was like 10, and then there was the version when I was 15, and the version when I was in my 20s, and et cetera.
But I would argue, like I was reading, that you're on your path of refinement.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just what the path, like I'm saying, it's not like, oh, you should now leave that and become a Noahide, or you should leave that now and come to Israel. I would say, like, no, you are having your relationship and your experience, and you need to keep on going to church, and you need to keep on refining your relationship, obviously, with God. Now, first of all, let's say, you said like, details to be, TBD.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say in 2015, the Vatican comes out with its statement, right, saying that it's a mystery, but like these are promises have been made, and like no more trying to evangelize the Jews, and they have redemption through the Torah, not through Jesus. By the way, that's a huge statement, which not enough people talk about, which they keep as a mystery. And I know maybe they get a lot of heat. Maybe I'm sure the Pope gets a lot of heat. He's pretty sick right now, so I guess I hope he'll heal, do well. But yeah, I don't know. Looking at it, like when you read a biblical story and you're like, oh, it's in biblical proportion, and then you look at the stories of Israel, like why are we the story? Why are we the focus of the world constantly, all the time, a nothing, little the size of New Jersey?
Yeah. Why are people so upset and have such strong feelings about Gaza, but when like Azerbaijan takes over that part of Armenia that was full of Armenians, and Azerbaijan noticing that Russia, who normally backs Armenia, seems a little bit weak and distracted at the moment, so I'm just going to grab this enclave of Armenians inside what we think is our rightful territory. You guys have a couple weeks to leave, pack up your bags, drive across, go move to Armenia. This is ours now. That happened, I forget exactly, within the last couple of years, right? The world was sort of like, oh well, maybe an aid package to Armenia. Sorry, what can we do? But when we're talking about the fate of Gazans, if Israel was to just go in and say, all right, guys, pack up, go to Jordan, go to Egypt, your pick. This is ours. You've got 3 weeks notice. Like, it would be the biggest thing ever, right? Even though those stories have so many parallels, except for the amount of attention that the world pays to it.
Hey, Bruce.
Hey, how's it going?
Thank God. How are you doing?
Good. Yeah. Sorry, I'm just hopping in because I saw the link here. So I don't have a lot of the background on what happened before this.
We were blaming you.
Yeah. Well, that's fair enough. Yeah. Now, I think it's interesting. I mean, I heard like the discussion on like why so much focus on Jews in Israel if they're so small. Is that right?
Yeah,
there seems to be. So
not
I mean,
so small. I mean, not so small, and I can't blame people thinking. I mean, thinking that Jews run the world and like conspiracy theories. Clearly, we're involved in tremendous amount of different we're we're around. We're around in Hollywood. We're around in tech. We're around in politics. Like so, I'm saying
Your high achieving civic mindedness constantly gets you guys in trouble.
I mean, but
Potentially,
also,
yeah. I mean, there could be two sides to that coin, I suppose. I'm curious on your take on it, Hezi. In one sense, you could say there's tremendous prosperity to God's chosen people, it seems, right? Such a small remnant that continue to have faithfulness from God in a number of avenues, right? But on the flip side, could you see it also as judgment, considering the amount of turmoil that comes upon them? And so it's not prosperity you're experiencing, but the wrath of God.
I would say it's both, which is the larger the responsibility, the bigger the stumbling blocks and the suffering.
Yeah, so, but in that right. But in that sense, that's what I mean. So like that amount of prosperity, that amount of blessing requires a tremendous amount, right, from somebody in terms of discipline and otherwise. And I'm not, is it something you can at all overcome, or is this judgment?
Right. So is it a feature or a bug? I would say that there's an element of it that's a feature. I would say the bug element is choice. As we keep messing around and fumbling, it's worse. And as we were taught, the Messiah could come in a blink of an eye. As in, it eventually will come. We can hasten it. And this is also how you can read different interpretations by the prophets. They have different prophecies because these are different timelines. Speaking in the MCU language, these are different timelines, and depending on how we act, you could see in Ezekiel and you could see in Isaiah or Zephaniah different attitudes towards the Gentile.
Right?
Does he come into the temple? Does he not? And it's sort of like what version are you playing?
Right. Well, what about, so like, how do you then go forth and like take, let's say, Nahum or Micah or any of these judgment language with like the near and far, right? So you have like near term judgment and far term judgment, and then also like near term Messiah and far term Messiah. So like, wouldn't it follow to some degree that there's going to be a mass movement of the Jews into Christ at some point, and or not at all, like one of the right, like one or the other? And so what I'm trying to say is this seems to be like part of the reason why this is such a big deal is because the Christian nature of the West has great stock in what occurs with the Jewish people, right? And that many people think it's by their free will political decisions that they make this occur. But I just kind of wanted to get your take on that.
I totally understand that. And I would say that even now, right, I would say, in 1948, there's like a theological smack in the face to both Muslims and Christians with the Israel nation's born. And since then, you could say like, right, everyone's sort of seeing like how this is going to play out. And you could argue the same thing for the Jews, right? Like, which is like, like you could say we all suddenly decide, we see the light, Christ is the way. I would argue that, and again, it's wrong of me to say this because like it's a very small controlled group, but my experience over the last few years in this little corner would to me be a data point of the reverse. I would say like the rise of the Noahides and the conversations with Paul, Jordan Peterson, Father Stephen DeYoung, all of this conversation that's bubbling up and cross-pollination between even within Christianity specifically, to me points on refinement in Christianity, which I believe, I would say, I believe ultimately becomes more abstract and ends in understanding the unity of the Father. However, as I was saying earlier, I don't see it as Christianity or Islam disappearing. And that's what the stream was about earlier. Rather, I see them, if Israel is properly oriented, then I think the Christians will be the proper Christians and the Muslims will be the proper Muslims. And there's the question is, and I don't have these details, where does Jesus fit in that, right? And to me, he's the only prophet, and Muhammad is the only prophet. Those are big questions. And and Islam is actually, Yosef had this interesting article about these two different academics, a Muslim and a Jew, having this discussion with you have two-tier Islam, which sees tier 1 is their din, which means both Christians and Jews have to accept this, which is the belief in God and resurrection of the dead and doing good deeds, which were all good in the hood. Then there's the Sharia, and everyone has their unique Sharia. So Judaism has its Mosaic Sharia of 613. The Christians have their Noahide with like a touch of Greek Roman attitude over there. The Muslims have their Sharia, and even in that language, for me, as I could say that for you, the Muslim, you call Muhammad the greatest. For me, the Jew, the greatest means he was the greatest for the people of Islam, that this is what they needed to hear from it. So there's ways to, now you could be like, it's a lot of Lego games, but I'm pointing to that perhaps both the Muslims and the Jews and the Christians still need to do more refinement of themselves to see potentially how they actually meet in the middle. And that's a scary conversation, because it means that one has to be open to redefining certain terms. And let's say as far as I've gone, for example, is the recognition, or at least having it in my toolkit, that there's a guy named Jesus. He's existed. He's divinely inspired. He's wanted by God. God gave him the power to perform miracles, and he potentially even was resurrected. I could go all that way. Now, I would say that, let's say, for an Orthodox Jew, right, that's like a long way, considering like, the history and where we've come from. I would say the Vatican coming out in 2015 and saying that Jews don't need salvation through Christ is a huge, crazy statement on their end, right? That's bananas. So then at that point, you're like, wait, so are we still fighting, or now can we just chill? And I would say TLC is the conversation where not only does the chilling happen, but rather the further refinement, because now I know myself and my Judaism better from talking to you, right? The opponent processing, and vice versa, right? Understanding more of where you get this Christian context from, and now understanding where the filioque meant and where it stems from. I mean, so that's why I remain optimistic.
Right. Was okay. Fair enough. On the other side, there's a sense in which, so how familiar are you with like the we'll call it the Puritan hope, or Romans 11 interpretation of the end times for Jewish people? So like there's a not a similar hope. Your hope is, I would say, much more universalist or political Unitarianism or something like that. This is more of mass conversion of Jewish people will happen, period. Like that's the hope that many have. So in that sense, that's why people would be so charitable or willing to pray and see such good things from Jewish people, so that they ought be saved one day, right? So like that eschatology was pretty common for a really long time among Reformed Protestants, as opposed to the Dispy side of it, which is a lot different. It's not political in that sense, right? So like effectively they see what happened to the Apostle Paul happening to all of the Jewish people. Now, who those Jewish people are and whether or not that has anything to do with the Nation of Islam is irrelevant, really. Like that's not really that's a detail that we can't really get into. But that sounds like what I would say somewhat similar to what you're after in this unification effort that you're talking about, or days of hope. But I mean, how familiar are you with that position?
I'm not too familiar with that position, but I would argue that even in Islam, right, I would say we're all reaching towards that place where we're all coming from our different perspective, obviously in our own context. But I would also argue that interpretation is that like how mainstream is that in Christianity?
It was quite mainstream. At this point, it's taken on new flavor with dispensationalism, so it's like largely political. But in the what would be considered the genesis of Reformed Protestantism, that was pretty common as far as interpretation goes. It was not doing the conflation, though, however, of the Jews of today and or Israel of today, right? Well, first of all, Israel wasn't a thing then, right? But you wouldn't do that. In other words, it wasn't a particular people that you could point to that look a certain way or in a certain place or a certain nation, right? So if this is the case, that would have been easier to deal. So that was a very popular take, and it's still pretty popular among Reformed Presbyterians, Reformed Baptists, and otherwise, because so as far as Christians and Reformed people see it, like the blasphemy toward Christ from Jewish people is the highest, right? Like it's the highest form of blasphemy.
Better.
Right. And so in that sense, it's like, no way, Jose, dude, there's no way we're letting those people in, right? Because they're like, really raking Jesus over the coals. But then there's a hope aspect that people have, which is like, well, in the same way that Paul was persecuting Christians and killing them, it will be a glorious day when Jewish people bend the knee because they are undeserving, just as I was, right? So that's the hope aspect of that thinking.
Right.
Personally, I fall closer to that side.
I got you. So, which is totally understandable, and I guess my hope is, in a certain sense, the reverse, which is, and I could understand how it sounds like, okay, you're leaving me with nothing, Chazi, but clearly, my issue with the sanctification of Jesus, I nevertheless, my hope is that because I believe that it is a divine movement, I don't see it as in like it was for nothing, or let's say your experience is wrong. I could only, and this sounds, I can understand how this sounds like demeaning, but I hope you know that it's coming out of love. And I give this expression before, which the way I call it is, and I think it happens a little in the TLC, or I hope that as Jews express their opinions, and not the way how they express it. Sometimes Jacob could be a little prickly, but when we express our opinions and we allow Christians to deepen their understanding even of their own roots and their own experience or their own relationship with Jesus, I see that as the hope of Christians then being able to ultimately, I would say, let's say, like Sam, move towards a Unitarian position, and B, then allow us Jews to properly learn from what the Christian religion has taught us and revealed to us about God, which we could only do once we feel like, those theological waters are clean. But I would say, again, there's a hope where it's tough. Obviously, I can't, there's a tension over there that I can't answer, right? Which is, you obviously have that tension.
Well, I think it plays into.
I'm lost to where to move on from here, but
no, it's
obviously,
fine. It plays into significantly where and how Israel today has relevance in the world or Christendom.
Not to beat one of my favorite drums, but I mean, what it makes me think about is like one thing that I've said in a couple of my videos recently is like in current, Trinitarian apologetics, they're constantly phrasing the question when looking at the New Testament, especially of, did this teach that Jesus was God or not? Did the early Christians believe that Jesus was God or not? And that's sort of the all or nothing question, and the sort of, is Jesus completely secular, ordinary, disenchanted, meaningless in any theological sense, or is he meaningful in a theological sense? And that's the question that gets posed as the binary. I'm like, look, guys, when you're reading through the Gospels, that's just not what they're talking about. That's just not the question that they're asking. That's just not the focus. That's not the relevancy that it is, zeroed in on. The question is Jesus the Messiah? That's what the whole Gospels are obsessed with, right? Is this drama? And that's similar to the tension in Hezi, and Jacob, is like, Well, what does a miracle need to look like, guys? I mean, he just raised someone from the dead. He fed 5,000 people. You know, like, what is it? John 31. When the Christ appears, will he do more signs than what this man has done? Right? That's like it's the same question in a certain sense. You know, when the Messianic age is upon us, will it look more miraculous than what's already happening in Israel now? And the question is this of God or is this just simply of man? Is the kind of the heart of the question. And that's what I feel like I still need to like figure out a way to talk to my fellow Christians. Guys, that was the question.
Well, I mean, I got to be honest with you, Sam. I'm a Christian, Trinitarian Christian, and I wouldn't call you a fellow. We're so I don't think anyone in the Christian Trinitarian world would be locking arms with you. Although I would say, like, you would be in the minority today, right? I mean, you obviously know that.
Well, yeah, the truth's never popular.
I mean, I suppose that's not necessarily true. The West was built upon Christian truth for a popular time, so I wouldn't say that.
But like, you get what I'm after, Bruce.
I think that's
the
more
question
like,
in the New Testament is what Jesus is doing and now of God, or is it just simply of man?
Well, I would say
maybe worse is it demonic, right?
I think the Reformed position would say everything's of God when it comes to ordained outcomes, right? So God is not somehow usurped by the will of man, nor is he trying to figure out what to do because man acts. So like it is of God as far as ordained is concerned, but whether or not things are righteous is a different discussion. And that's why it's so important for the Trinitarian position, because mere man Messiah doesn't take on the sins of the world unless he's God. So that's why we have that position, right? It also, you know, much of the Trinitarian
no verse
position,
in the entire Bible ever, but go ahead anyway. Says no one for the first 100 years of Christianity ever, but okay, whatever.
And I would obviously.
Well, I mean, historical development is important. I wouldn't, you know, it's not as though the first 100
historical
years
deviation away from the truth of God into something invented by man that you call your theology, but whatever. Okay, you know, go for it. No Bible verse ever taught that the Messiah would be God. I mean, you're anointed by God. That's what Messiah literally means, is anointed. Who's anointing the Messiah?
I mean,
did someone anoint God? Does someone have authority to anoint God?
How much?
I think it's pretty clear when there's all over 1 Timothy, Colossians, John. I mean, it's all over the place.
Happy to talk about any verse you want, but someone anoints the Messiah and it's God, and God can't be anointed by someone. There's no one of the authority or ability or sanctity to do such a thing.
Well, you're just mistaking the hypostatic union. Also, like, there's so much Trinitarian theology that builds upon all that we have. Like, three is so important with regard to our world. So, like, but
do you know how many times God is described with the word three in the entire Bible? In the entire Bible, God is never described with the word three once. Old Testament and New Testament together.
To be fair, though, whether it's the sages or the church elders, right? You know, there's powers of interpretation, right? Of what certain, you could look at which I obviously clearly disagree with, but the three visitors to come visit Abraham, right? Here's three, and like.
Yeah, I mean, not to mention the fact that the Trinity logically manifests relationality in the world. So relationality exists before it actually exists in the world. The relationship in the Trinity is what gives rise to the possibility of relationality in the world, right? The Father loves the Son loves the Spirit, and it's all.
If you want to bring this to logic, I don't think that's a game that's going to go very well for you. But
I mean, relationality is actualized in the world with the creation of Eve and the love they have witnessed by the Father. It's the same thing that occurs in the Trinity. I mean, this is why Trinitarian Christianity has won out in the ages and continues.
It's because you're more willing to kill your enemies than your enemies were willing to kill you.
Well, if it's fair that oppression and killing somehow wins the day, Christians would have lost, but they didn't.
Well, things seem to have changed after a while.
I would argue, though, that there's a difference clearly between, you know, your claim was that only a divine Messiah could, absolve us from our sins. In Judaism, we just have repentance. So,
Well, but I
don't
mean,
think it's-
yeah, but Jesus is the high priest, right? So he's doing the work of Melchizedek. Yes, that's what we're saying, right?
yeah, but even then, it's just a mediator. It's not. I have to repent, right?
Yeah,
David,
I understand. But
So who does Jesus mediate between?
man and God?
So he's not God then if he's mediating between God and man.
Well, you have to understand that there's many things going on here.
So
Number
God
one,
is his
man-made
own
flesh.
mediator? Can you
Correct.
be your own mediator?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
why even use the word mediator?
Well, these are the terms we must
So
use.
there
in
is
the
no
same sense that-
mediator, is what you're saying.
Well,
Actually,
so you
God
just-
is his own mediator, so therefore there is a direct connection
That's
between
right,
man
actually.
and God.
Yes, it's
So
actually
there is
very
no
important.
mediator, I guess.
Yeah, there is a mediator. There's an important distinction.
God is his own mediator, such that there is no mediation.
That's right.
if you guys don't mind, though.
That's
because-
actually what makes it correct, right? Because I'm sorry, Hezi, go ahead.
I'm just saying, let's take a step back for a second, because we obviously, guys, we know you guys disagree about that, and I doubt you guys are going to convince each other right now by you mentioned the right verse. However, I would ask, and then again, it's TLC related, and so Bruce is also with your involvement here in TLC. What do you like? Do you see this? We'll use a term, let's say Christian YouTube, and this is not Christian YouTube. What do you call this space? Because Sam is not a fellow. Right. And we know that doesn't mean you don't have any harm and you want his kids to be healthy. We get all that. He's not a fellow.
We'll see what state his theology would result in and how well it would treat Unitarians. I have my doubts.
I would ask, what do you see this space as? Do you see this as, like right now, is this a conversation that you joined to learn more? I'm just chilling. Is there an element of evangelizing, or is it like, no, like I'm just like, or is this like a fruitful conversation because you see us as three believers that are, we want to connect to the source?
I mean, it's I don't see this as anything other than the internet and talking on the internet per se. Like it's the same thing we've always done forever since we've been on the internet. So I don't see a distinction there. I guess I'm not like categorizing this into some whatever. So I'm not seeing it that way. And then also, like, I would say I treat all people as image bearers of God who are worthy of respect. So in that sense, correct, right? I'm not interested in defaming people for the sake of it per se. And also, I find it interesting to converse with people because I do like people. Contrary to some other beliefs, but I like people. I think that every conversation is fruitful to some degree, even if it's not for yourself or for them. It helps your discernment. It helps your ability to navigate, like all of those sorts of things. So that's why. And then also, like, arguably speaking, you're speaking of something that interests me, right? So just, curiosity, interest, and also, evangelical reasons, right? I think every opportunity when you speak to someone is the opportunity to speak about the most important things, which is, salvation in Christ.
Which I would argue, like, all three of us are ultimately talking about, right? Like I'm saying, I'm not calling them crazy, but we're all looking for that salvation. And I guess my not a challenge, but I would ask, I guess for me, this is so much bigger than the internet right now. And now I don't hang out on the internet. Like I don't game. I don't like, so I'm saying I don't have an internet culture. Obviously I Google stuff and I look for things, but I don't have like a site, like Discord is only relevant to me for TLC. So I would ask again, like when you say the space is the internet, do you see this as any other space in the internet, or no, this is a place where there's something else that's bubbling? And the only reason I ask for that, I'm asking is because like, it's sort of, you don't see him as a fellow and here's a Jew. Now you can be like, well, it's just interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see anyone who doesn't affirm the Trinitarian nature of God as a Christian with me, right? That's pretty clear.
I didn't realize Christian. You didn't count the apostles or Jesus as non-Christians. That's pretty harsh. Or the first couple hundred years of Christianity, you're just going to throw that under the bus? Well, that's pretty exclusive.
No, I'm throwing Arianism under the bus along with the Jehovah's Witnesses and every other cult.
Which Christian prior to say 360 AD do you find acceptable?
All those who would affirm the Trinity, right?
Okay, great. So there's none of them. Do you have a name, a document, a date, a person that I can look up that you would consider a Christian before, say, 360 AD?
No, I would argue that your position is anachronistic, right? So like just because people are developing language, They're developing the church.
So
There are
you're
much bigger
saying there's
issues
no
to
one
fry.
who had the right language before 360 AD? A name, a date, a book, a document, something.
No, I'm
I
not
can
playing
look
a
up?
language game. No, I'm not playing a language
I'm
game.
not playing a language game either. I'm playing a people game. What people do you think were proper Christians before 360 AD? And any corroborating evidence would be appreciated.
Anyone prior to the development of the Council of Nicaea. So that doctrinal development doesn't happen on that date, right? That doesn't
I
happen.
agree.
that
There
day.
were no Trinitarians at the Council of
It's
Nicaea.
taught. No, it's taught and affirmed throughout history. Yes, people are teaching these things, and they come to affirm this in their confession and creed. It's not as though this arises out of thin air one day in a document. People are teaching this for
If it's so
decades and
important,
centuries.
why didn't Jesus teach it?
Jesus did teach it. That's what they're
Who
trying
did
to
he
say.
teach it to?
Everyone. Oh shoot.
Which people that he taught show evidence of having received that knowledge from him?
The apostles in the New Testament and affirming that Jesus is God, especially Paul
Sam,
and
excuse me, Sam,
Timothy.
excuse me for 1 second.
Sorry, I gotta
Paul.
run. I have a meeting in like 3 minutes, so I
Bruce,
might be back. I might be back. Sorry.
Cut you later. What I was going to ask Bruce is, what is the necessary evidence, so to speak, to change his mind, right? And that's really
Yeah.
at the end.
I mean, one subject that I think is interesting that I was going to bring up that is sort of related to this is pluralism always brings up difficulties around group identity. And religion is not a solo activity. Religion is a group activity, except if you're like a California Buddhist. But even then, they still tend to do stuff in groups. And religious groups do need some kind of boundary identifiers. You know, Bruce isn't completely wrong about that. He just happens to be wrong about the ones that he's picked. And that I get that it's like, you know, Paul talks about, Vanderklay talks about, what's that book that talks about how there was sort of like the meta-divine realm for pagans, right? There was gods, and there was like the meta-divine realm that they all dwelled in. And pluralism often does something like that. Like, you guys each thought you kind of had the one God, but you guys disagreed too much about this one God, or at least who mediates between that one God, because someone needs to mediate between that one God. It's seemingly not a thing that he does himself. But then it gets turned into this weird sort of meta-divine realm of plural monotheisms. And yet there is still needing to be something that unites the monotheisms. And is Judaism the vase that holds the monotheistic flowers within it, right? As sort of you were describing. Because when you say, well, actually all of you guys are kind of all cool in your different ways, you're having to assert something higher than the different ways again. And it's like, that was what Christianity was kind of originally doing. It was sort of bursting the Jew, non-Jew bubble, right? And saying, we can unite everybody. We found a way. We are bringing it together into the new unity, but now you have like different kinds of Christianity.
I agree.
Islam, different kinds of Islam, different kinds of Judaism. And so you need to like burst the unity bubble again. But there's the condescension of saying, all of you guys need to give up your claim to be that unity bubble. And it's tricky because that's a lot to ask of some of these exclusivist traditions.
First of all, totally. I would argue that the request is not coming from someone random, right? It's coming from Judaism, right? It's coming from to Islam and Christianity. It's, you know, we talk about a brave space. It's a conversation that's happening with, quote unquote, the source, right? So like it's not coming out of nowhere. Number one, I would say it's harder to take such a statement coming from, you know, a random religion, so to speak, with regards to its connection to Christianity and Islam. Second of all, I would say that there is for an arrow to fly straight, right? It needs a point of orientation. It needs to be an arrowhead. It's not going to fly successfully if it doesn't have the back of the arrow. Forgive me if I don't know the words, but there needs to be one point of orientation. That doesn't mean it's better. It just means it's pointing towards that space. Now, I would argue that that as we move further, we're moving towards more and more abstraction. And I think there are terms, and this is what Judaism talks about. Yes, Christianity is seen, according to Maimonides and others, as I was just reading, as a Noahide religion, as one that's creating a pathway for the Messiah, very much doing that. The claim is that it fails by unifying because it doesn't preach the Torah properly. That's the claim, not the claim that the idea is wrong or the wanting to unify is wrong or even the success that it managed to have. It's rather it's saying it's not mirroring that idea properly. And that's the same claim towards Islam. Now, why I say it's unique is because Christianity can universalize Judaism in a way Judaism can't. And we want that. I still want that to happen. However, I still want that being promulgated properly. That now you're saying if I'm coming and speaking from this position, it's speaking for the position of if we all want to do this properly and be unified, then we all need to be together. I'm not fully complete if I don't have my Christian brother with me doing that. So yes, again, there's a sense of responsibility and a point of orientation, but the arrowhead is not any more significant than the back of the arrow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, the same claim obviously would be said towards, Christianity is trying to do that unity, right? So what is Judaism in that case? The unity that Judaism is offering and the plurality that Judaism is offering is unity with diversity, right? I want there to be different languages. I want there, and this is the rectification of Babel, which is in Babel, if it's all one words in one speech, right? And then there isn't room for the individual to express himself. That's sort of the authoritarian thing. So Abraham needs to move away from that. Now we want to bring back a pure speech where we could speak to each other through different languages, though. As in everyone has fully emerged in manifesting who they are. And because they fully manifest in who they are, when you will use your terms, and this is the idea, which is after this so-called purification of the theology, I don't want you now to drop the concept. I'm just using this as an example of Mary. It could be that it's very important for you still to maintain that. And I would argue that some of your conversation with regards to your historical context and all the conversation you're having with your academics is you trying to sort of clarify, what these terms mean and how should we use these terms. So, and that's why I was sort of challenging Bruce and saying, what are you doing in this space? Are you in this space to talk? Are you in this space for clarification? And if you're in this space for clarification because you realize I can't have this conversation in my church, then to me, that's why the TLC is a magical space, because it allows us to actually, I mean, I don't want to say like test our religions, but test our theology out, see if it actually is mapping onto another reality. And I would say that if we're in agreement here in a certain sense or about most things, that is miraculous. And I look at that as, how is that not God's children, singing his praises and trying to come closer or making their way towards the temple? Because it's not all of us become Jewish. Right. And there's also plenty of verses talking about verses. God calls Egypt my people.
I mean, and so like the way that I understand that sort of ancient Judaism understood their pluralism situation is that, basically all the nations had their gods, but they were lowercase g gods, and that Israel had the unique direct connection to highest God. And that way they were the high priestly nation of the nations.
Just to clarify, everyone had that connection up until a certain point.
Right.
When Enosh comes in, and then that name starts being used together with other forces. Again, just to clarify, which is natural and we understand, which is why we appreciate those religions, because there's how humans are dealing with abstract ideas at that time. Judaism has. There's a midrash. It's the original King Arthur story. Moses leaves Egypt, chilling in Midian, and it says, how did Jethro decide to select him to marry his daughter? Jethro, and also this is also why Jethro is not with the rest of the camp, why he's like already the story sort of Jethro is away from the camp and the people are being mean to the daughters of Jethro, even though the high priest, is because he started going towards the direction of really like everything was God ultimately, right? He knew there was something more than this, and he was worshiping everything he could get his hands on. He was worshiping because he understands the source is obviously unified behind this. And the story is that through the lineage of the Canaanites, he receives the staff of Abraham. And on it is the Tetragrammaton, right? We obviously said this is symbolic, but the idea is he has wisdom of this unified concept that was lost. And he himself...
How would the staff of Abraham have the Tetragrammaton on it if the Tetragrammaton was revealed to Moses?
First of all, fantastic question. Even though the sages do talk about, like, because if you think about the story that's happening with the angels in the tent and before the attack on Sodom, Abraham's having an insane revelation over there. He's standing there, God's talking to the angel, he's just there. So clearly there was something going on over there, but sure. And that's why I'm saying that the concept is there's wisdom being passed on, right, on the staff, and Jethro is having a hard time interpreting it, right? Comes Moses, right, from the house of Levi when he comes back, and he says, oh, I know that symbol, right? Now, you could, if you want to be meta modern, we could talk about the historical Ramesses and I'm forgetting the exact name of the Egyptian god that had some sort of monotheist religion, and he had a leader. Sure,
I know who you mean. I know who you mean. Yeah, it's like Muhammad or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I know what it is.
Map.
That guy, you can see him in heaven right now, rolling his eyes, being like, "They never get my name right." But I would say that's sort of like a hint, which is showing you, okay, Moses is aware from his childhood already of some sort of unified story, and that's like when he sees the staff or speaking to Jethro, starts speaking this language. Jethro's like,
Akhenaten. Sorry, Akhenaten.
Akhenaten. Okay, as we know, I see Yongan hooked us up over here as well. Okay, so even if you want, I don't know if that's what Freud was claiming, but even if we want to claim it's that, the idea is that there were few and far between people that could recognize unity, which is, by the way, that is the secret. That is the secret of Kabbalah, which is the unification. It's all unified. It's all one ultimately. Mm-hmm. And which was just very hard to explain, right? So through the spheres and the faces of God and the Adam Kadmon and Zeir Anpin, these are all stories. And if major Kabbalists could start explaining to you why even the rise of LGBTQ and all that also connects to boundaries being opened up. And as we move to Messianic times, we don't have to get into that. My point being, the concept of unity, right? And the Trinity, which, as you see, many people have an issue with, right? Which in a certain sense is why one of our great sages qualifies them as Noahites. He says, because if you ask almost any Christian, they can't explain to you the Trinity, and ultimately they mean the source, the one. So they could say, they could call it this, they could call it that, but they're talking about the Father. And I could know how that could be very insulting to many Christians over here. But I don't know if you would agree with me that that's usually the case with the Christians.
Another interesting question is, so very similar to what you were talking about with the emergence of the state of Israel, or the modern state of Israel, and connections to its messianicness or its God-ordainedness and all of that, was the rise of Constantine presenting a very similar question for Christians about the kingdom of God, right? Is this Roman emperor is of God? Is this the kingdom of God? Is Constantine's Christianization and his sons and his successors, is their Christianization of the Roman Empire of God? And is this now, the kingdom of heaven, basically, right? There's the kingdom of heaven, God's will is being done in heaven, and here it is being done on earth. You want to know where the kingdom of God is on earth? Well, here's our current boundaries, and our current emperor is emperor such and such, right? And the current bishop of Constantinople is so-and-so. And right, like this melding of political and religious thing that that wasn't happening there, right, in early Christianity, right? Because, the emperor was still, a pretty evil pagan guy. And there, you get the impression in some of the writings that not all of the Christians thought that this was the greatest idea to suddenly start melding these two things together. But obviously the victors get to write the books, and almost all of the books are written by that. And the connection to the Trinity is, are we going to anoint those councils that were held by Constantine and his heirs with supernatural, authority and significance and meaning? And obviously the Catholic and Orthodox Church will say yes, right? And we're still that same church that, Jesus founded and that Constantine enhanced. And then Protestants are like, kind of no. But there's this weird legacy, right, of Christians who are Protestants, but still kind of want to like some of that Constantine juice. They still want some of that secret sauce. Do I have a kid wandering around my background? I do. Do like some of that secret sauce that was part of that Constantinian revolution, and still kind of take that as an anointing, right, of some kind. And it's very much connected with, was the Christianization of Rome of God, right? Or was it of man?
I would have to say it is, because it lasted so long, right? I'm saying, and as Maimonides says, his ways are not our ways, and his thoughts are not our thoughts. But clearly, right, something that is lasts so long, has such an effect on society and all the culture. Assuming you're playing in the simulation we called, the world and that God created, then you have to start asking questions, right? The same thing, asking like, what are miracles? Like, is this of God? I don't know. Has it lasted like 2,000 years and it's still here and it's shaped the whole country, that like in the whole world? Then it looks like it's from God, assuming you believe, right, in this God situation. And now you could look at it and be like, of course everything's ultimately from God, right? But then there's more of like, no, is it more specific? Now with a prophet, it's very specific, right? He's literally coming out of his mouth. And you look at it as to the nation of Israel, or to people acting properly. So I would argue that it's not a surprise. It's not a surprise that elevating one's morals and focusing on God was successful, because that's what we believe ultimately is going to happen, and why Islam and Christianity are the heavy hitters, right? And how all the other religions, and even the Eastern religions, with their cross-pollination with Christianity and Islam, also softened their ways, got rid of virgin sacrifices. I would argue that the Hindus that are unique in that they are not. They've allowed themselves to be more open-minded to certain change, which I think allowed them, as far as the pagan religions, to survive this long, because they've reformed in ways that allowed them to sort of move forward, right? If when the Shinto talks about we believe in 8,000 gods, and then you realize, well, 8,000 is 8 meaning infinity, and you mean like everything is a god, then you're like, okay, so now we're really talking the same language. But that took thousands of years to clarify, and blood and death, and the only place and now we don't even realize how fortunate we are. We sit in these beautiful homes talking on the internet, being like, yeah, I'm just sitting on the back of giants, and now I could easily say, hey Sam, I love you, bro, everything's okay. And like, sacrifice, blood, fighting, all, but I believe it's worth it to get to this point where we peel off more levels of this realized or embodied God, and recognize that there's this abstract idea that we can't fully understand, obviously, but the more it becomes more abstract, the more we could realize we could bring more people in. Now, to clarify, because Jake is going to be like, you're going new age and it means nothing and everything is everything and everything's one. So, okay, so that's not what I'm saying. I'm pointing at the God of Israel, which, by the way, the Christians and the Muslims agree with, okay, who that God is, right? I'm saying the Father we're talking about right now, or what you want to call him, Allah, and there's different attributes he has between the sects, but that's what we're talking about. So you're really, and if you think about it, the 2 billion and then the other billion, like I'm saying, you're talking about most of the planet at some point. So I don't know. I think we're moving towards there. We're I don't know. These conversations to me make me extremely optimistic, because I look at this in contrast of what happens like in Israel right now. I look at this as like, these are all data points.
Yeah. Well, I should get going soon. For the record, Bruce, I consider you a fellow, just a fellow who's confused about who his fellows really are, which is a big deal. But
I appreciate this, though, Sam. Thank you.
No, I appreciate you, Hezi. We should talk some other time again.
We'll talk more.
We haven't gotten a ton of time to like talk one-on-one like this. This was by
It's
far
not
the
bad.
most
It's
fun.
pretty good.
Yeah, this was great. Yeah.
I'll catch you
All
later,
right.
buddy.
Have a good one.
Take care.
Bye.
Ooh, wow. Serious conversation. We ignored the hive mind, but I saw that Mark was very, very involved and lively. So, Mark, thank you for your constant feedback. The way you analyze things is always very enlightening, and you have an extremely sharp mind. So I appreciate that tremendously. Sherry, the queen, I hope all is well. I mean, we're all blessed to even know Sherry. She's another data point of the rise of the feminine. We're very blessed. Yon God is here. Yon, I hope you're doing well. Dawn, always fun to see you as well. Marco, I see barf. No one is wrong. I think he's wrong. I mean, like, I don't know. I don't think Sam's wrong because Sam's a Unitarian. So, like, as long as he's not saying Jesus is God, he's not wrong. In this case, what can you do? Both agree. Oh, Jason is here. Yason, I hope you're doing well, buddy. Jess, did we mention Job? We did not mention Job. I'm sorry. We tried. RJ is here as well. How are you, buddy? Mark. Trinity, as you might with Zencoin. Okay, well, he left, but Mark, I hope you're doing well too. I've been enjoying your conversations. The one you had with Rick was also great. Thank you for that. Garth, I hope you and the wife are doing well. Okay, internet culture conversation. Manuel was here as well. I hope he's doing well. He had a comment, I think, about a point of processing, and he's saying that sounds like what I think he was joking when it says it sounds godly. I'll just say that is the relationship with Adam and Eve, and the verse says Ezer Kenegdo, right? A help against him is a reference of a point of processing, and if done properly, right, you could be unified again as one or see the full picture. So I don't know. I still see that as godly, but I hope you're doing well. I don't know who this is. Okay, anyone that didn't get Clara's here. She's been gone for a while, right? Writing her secret book about the TLC, or her research about the TLC. I hope she's doing well. Did we ever get the answer what kind of ice cream she likes? Apparently I made a mistake over here. This sounds like University Time itself here. Chazi's not being accurate here at all, in my honest opinion. Thank you for being honest. Maybe I'm not being accurate. I don't remember the context over here, but I am far from perfect. Okay. Circle of Life he was singing over here. It's just people who had never, maybe, yeah. By the way, but that's still the case. The guide for the perplexed is when there weren't many perplexed people, because most people were not aware of this information, that it would challenge their theological foundations. However, now you have a nation, you have a whole society that is perplexed. And that's why it's not even, it's sort of the rise of the Kabbalah also, because it's no longer sufficient to answer Jews or believers today with 1,000-year-old Torah. Well, it's still 1,000-year-old Torah, but it's secret and deep Torah, which many times was very hard to understand for the uninitiated. But now, I would argue, if you're sending your kids to study about physics and biology, the theological conversation could be upped as well with these kids, and teaching them a different kind of Torah or a deeper Torah is more necessary today. Okay, Okay, sharing. Okay, it looks like I hit everyone up. Thank you for participating. To all you beautiful, beautiful people. All right. Catch you guys on the flip. Where is that button? Here it is. End stream.